Toi te reo Māori ki tūturu ka whakamau ki Tina.
Tina.
Huie, taike. So that karakia just acknowledges our ancestors and clears our path and supports us in terms of moving forward together. So I thought it was quite fit for today for me. Thank you for your indulgence. The apologies that we have today, I think, for Deputy Mayor James. Do we have any other apologies in terms of people leaving early today? No, then I'm happy to move those apologies. Could I please have a second? Yep, we'll give a second. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you. I assume there is no urgent business in terms of declarations of interest. I have a standing one in terms of directorship for Waikato Waters. Are there any other declarations of interest in terms of the items we're covering today? There being none. Should you mind moving that? Yes, fine. Councillor Bruce, would you mind seconding?
Aye.
All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, very cool. So if I don't have a rain sheet, do you have a rain sheet? My apologies, team. But I would imagine that our next item would be in relation to the minutes from our last committee. Are there any items of accuracy that committee members would like to point out in terms of those minutes? Thank you.
Happy already.
Mayor Ashes, Councillor Andrew is seconding. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Excellent. So if I bring us to our agenda for today, the first item is 7.1, which is the review of the Risk and Assurance Charter. Do we have any team members that are wanting to present on this? Just checking. I get that it is ours, but nonetheless, if there was anyone that had any comments. If I go back to our hui from last time, it's an opportunity for us to reflect on what the objectives or the purpose of this particular committee are, and for those who have served on this committee previously to utilise that knowledge in terms of what they think would be appropriate, if any, in terms of changes. So I'm happy to open for comments or questions from the floor.
Yeah, I don't think it's I wouldn't have thought the responsibilities have changed too much over the past year. My only query would be the quorum shall consist of a majority of members. Do we want a number on that, or do you want majority is how is a majority defined? I suppose is my question.
Usually 50 point whatever percent to be fair.
Okay. Yep.
To be quorum, and I think that stands for our standing orders anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my alignment. My understanding it was an alignment there.
Yeah.
But good to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my only comment, Madam Chair, is that I mean we reviewed it again. I think it was September.
Yeah.
And happy with it then, and I personally haven't changed my opinion since that point in time.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
Mr. D might have.
No, that's exactly why I said it's quite adequate.
The only thing that I would say is within the charter, specifically 6.3, it talks about internal audit, and we don't necessarily have a formal, I would say, internal audit program, but I guess that leaves space if there were to be. Manai, do you have any comment on that?
Yes, what we are doing at the moment, I referred to it in my report, an organisation review, and functionally that's one of the considerations that we're giving, how we allow for that process with our own resources, or whether we need to engage external resources. So
I would have thought that it happens. It's like a de facto thing anyway, because we know that we're being audited, and the internal auditors.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Sorry, you're absolutely right, Councillor Thomas. There are significant external audits that occur, but there are areas that aren't audited and processes. So, in any continuous improvement process, it's good that we have a structured reflection of that. And so we wouldn't do areas that are already heavily audited. We wouldn't focus on that.
Yeah, just on that, I think the internal audits, they were sort of more drilled down onto a specific thing, didn't it? It was topical, wasn't it, usually?
Well, I think absolutely. Yeah. The other reflection I'd have is is if you look at our top risks now, which are very clearly identified, one of the obvious things is, for me anyway, is, well, how much of these are covered by an external audit and what are the gaps there? It's a starting point. So the risk framework's actually giving us good direction, in my view. So it is definitely on our radar as to how we bring that into our structure.
That probably segs into something I was sort of thinking about with the external audit and internal audits. Is I know we're probably legislated to have an annual external audit, which I think is a huge cost and money and staff time. Are we able to push back through LGNZ around having maybe an external audit once every triennium, and the other 2 or 3 years are done with just internal audits? I'm not sure what the whole scenario about that is, but
of course we could push back. I think what the answer is likely to be is, number one, the auditing process is very heavily connected to the accounting standards. There's a very strong process around that. I think there has already been representations by Local Government New Zealand in this term around the extent of audits, particularly around the long-term plan. So that has been put on the radar. But I think the fact that we are so connected, and this isn't a criticism, this is normal business is auditing. It's just that some of us have a view about whether or not we're deriving complete value in terms of aspects of the audit, and that's not a criticism because the auditors are operating within a framework. So I think if we could, long-winded answer, I think the push is there a way to modify the scope of certain audits that don't compromise the accounting standards? That would be helpful. And as I say, there's some work done on that, and I suspect there'll be more work done on that, or more pressure on that, I suspect.
Yeah, just if I could comment on that, the audit and the cost of the audits is coming up just recently too in local government conversations with LGNZ, and also just basically in a lot of meetings that are coming up, because it is putting pressure, because they are getting, in my opinion, out of control with the costing on them. I'll be bringing it up when audit getting to say, so I think something might happen in that space, Andrew, and I think they are talking to ministers about that, because it is, it's a huge cost.
It's how finite the depth that thing goes. There's a scope, like when I was saying.
Yeah.
How can we pick that up when we come to the audit fees paid? I think we might be quite vocal in terms of that, but to answer the question that was put, our legislated in terms of our requirement to have our financial annual audited annually, but that's not to say that we can't push for efficiencies across different spaces. So thanks for that comment. Were there any other comments in terms of the charter that we have in front of us? Otherwise, Matt Ash is moving that we accept the charter as is. Okay, we're going to go with, I'm going to second it because I don't know how to choose between the two of you. So nonetheless, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Thanks, team. And I just wanted to point out the reason why I raised the internal audit is that we don't necessarily structurally use it at the moment, but there is an opportunity for that in the future should it become funded and more robust way. But thank you for that. If we move to the next item, and so I'll start with my apologies that I didn't get a written report to yourselves before this particular hui. But I will say that I did attend an OAG forum last week where the Treasury presented their economic and fiscal update. And the key message for that was around creating resilience in your balance sheet to provide contingency for unexpected events. And so that's what they're doing from a central government perspective. And I just would like to, I think that is relevant for local government as well, because we're in effectively the same situation, that there's a lot of emergency related events that are happening around the country at the moment, which are having a toll not only on the communities, but in terms of the resource that is required to deal with those particular emergencies. So I'm not asking for any kind of comment on that, but I just put that as something that I'm sure we're all aware of, we're sure we're all taking into account. And the other thing is that I attended an independent audit and risk or risk and assurance chairs forum yesterday. And we were fortunate enough to have the Auditor General come and speak to us. And one of the things that he talked about was having a one office approach. So if you're not aware, currently there is the OEG and there's Audit New Zealand, and so the two of them may not have been as connected as was envisaged. And so what he has done is he is bringing those two offices back together. And so from a local government, or from our perspective, the difference that we might see is in terms of our direct dealings with the new organisation, it will be through our audit director. We won't have to go to a sector manager for this or someone else for that. We will have one point of contact. And I think that would only be a good thing in terms of the efficiencies that we might see in that space.
Well, they might be cheaper.
But I don't know that he was promising that, but thank you very much. But I do think it's a good sign in terms of where we could be heading. The other thing that we talked about was the impact of artificial intelligence on the different processes across all organisations. And one of the things we dove deep into was procurement. What could that look like when you're utilising artificial intelligence? So as an example, if we're sending out RFPs, we might get a lot of submissions that come in, and they might all be written by artificial intelligence. So how are we changing our workflow so that we can get a more efficient process? So not to say that we're not doing that at the moment. We talked about insurance in terms of the softening of the market, which obviously we see in our insurance paper being reflected. And we also talked about local water done well and the need for elected members to have a prudence mindset in terms of what it looks like for not only the water CCO that they may or may not be part of, but also what does the residual council look like, and how are we making sure that what we're doing in terms of level of service, in terms of rate collectability, is sustainable. So my apologies again that I wasn't able to get that to you in an actual report. If there are any questions on any of those forums that I attended, I'm happy to take those. That being done, I'm happy to move my own report as well. And Mayor Ash is seconding. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, Kumana carried. So nonetheless, in the future, my intention with the report is to actually ask questions of staff, ask questions of the Risk and Assurance Committee, and ask questions of council in terms of what I'm seeing out there. So thank you very much for your indulgence, and we'll move to 8.2, which is Manao's update. Thanks, Manao.
Kia ora, te mana. Yes, thank you. So I try to report in my report on issues that are not already included on the agenda. There's a significant number of issues that are on the agenda, particularly in relation to top risk. So take the report as read. Just want to highlight a couple of things in respect of risk. Firstly, to the storm event, what a wonderful response by our staff and contractors that we work with, and power companies, but also our local community to that whole event. It was really, we had people volunteering their efforts, taking rubbish away. It was green waste, etc. It was really heartening, and we know that there are a number of communities that were hit and have since been hit a lot harder than us. So I think the key thing there for us as an organisation is the focus on this landslip hazard. We had already identified it through our team, but we're also getting direction from the CDM group at Waikato Region that it's obviously expectations about quantifying those risks and how we respond to events in perhaps different ways uppermost in our minds, or not just our minds, or probably all councils. I just thought I'd just touch on the financial position of the council, given the last report that went to council. And from a risk perspective, there are two things I want to say. Well, we are tracking fine in terms of our finances. Our process is delayed. Our timing in terms of reporting to council is we're behind. So that's something that I will be we are addressing at the moment. So I just want to assure you that while things look all right, we're not where I want to be in terms of the timing of the reports to council. and it is a focus for me. The annual plan has been quite a big piece of work for the council, and I just, in this case, I've reported on where we've landed as a council and the draft plan, but I just thought it worth flagging that we've got some, particularly one new risk in there, and that's this transition and what that means for us this year. There's some unknowns in relation to that. So just how some of the transactions will occur in terms of how we provide services to Waikato Water. So it's not a standard year, I suppose, is what I would say. But I think we've got good processes in place and good support with our colleague councils involved in that, and with Waikato Waters Limited. To your point about your last report about the organisational review, the post-Waters organisation structure, I had already reported to council that we are working through that process. We're very aware of the impact that can have on staff, the uncertainty that creates, so we're trying to move that as quickly as possible, taking on board the things that council have fed back to me since October about the direction that it wants to take. So taking the opportunity to look at our structure to reflect that. And I think that it's that uncertainty and change fatigue and BAU are probably the risks that come from that, because parts of our organisation have had the spectre of change in front of them for 6 or so years in the water space. So this fatigue issue can manifest, and one way that happens is that people look for other jobs. So that's just something we're very aware of. And I suppose in terms of our process, that's why we've tried to be very clear with our staff about our process and timing, so that at least what we can control are those aspects of it. We can give them certainty of process, not necessarily certainty of outcome. In my last report in December, I made reference to the many pieces of legislation that we were expecting to have to make submissions on. Te Ohutaka to Anamata, our Future Ready Group, there's a forum internally that we set up to help us manage through that. I have to say, I'm incredibly proud of the effort of our team and our who have taken on board this legislation and worked on it over the Christmas period or early into January to be in a position to present to council the submissions for council to consider and to approve and to give feedback to us. It's been a big ask, and it doesn't stop there. But I'm very proud of our team. And again, it's a big tip, if you like, to the collegial approach in local government. You know, we're trying to work together with our colleague authorities to share our ideas, share the issues, to ensure that we don't miss anything. So I'm very, very, very pleased about how that has worked here. As I say, it hasn't stopped, and hopefully council feels that it's had a chance to influence those submissions to the extent that it wanted to. I mentioned Waikato Waters there, just some issues matters that we're dealing with. We have got an internal transition team which is led by Fiona Bessie, with representatives from various subject matter experts in the organisation, and they have the risk register that they're working against, and they're functioning very, very well. It's a big piece of work. There's no question. It's a massive piece of work for us. And again, I'd like to acknowledge all the effort of the teams involved in that. And we're tracking, whilst in terms of the overall program, while some things might not have, might still need to be resolved, we're generally tracking on target for the key milestones, of which the debt guarantee is one of those which council will be discussing tomorrow. And on that note, I think that's the last thing. Hopefully, I've given you a flavour of some of the things that relate to the committee's areas of influence or of in relation to its terms of reference.
No, good report. No, looking at that was good. Just want to commend the clean-up crew. You know, after the storm event. Did a great job. I guess the plus side to some of these like emergency situations where we're responding to storm events that we don't really have much control over is that we learned from it, and it came across that the team pretty much knew what they had to do and they just got in and got it done. And there's so many good feedback coming from the different communities about how council responded to that and got that done, which was great. Probably from a risk and insurance point of view, something that, I took because of the power outages was another problem in its own. And I think we had a problem in the wastewater treatment plants that, we need to get power up and running there. Going forward with that, it's something like, maybe a backup generators for the critical plants, in case that does happen, again, I mean, whether that's possible or the size of the generator needed, I'm not sure. I'm not an electrician, but, it's just something you take out of these events, I guess. Yeah.
100%. And we do have backup generators at certain plants. We also have a backup generator, which fairly large one at Allen Street at Morrinsville, which can be transported. But of course, events like this, you do question and you do reflect on whether we've got the right coverage. And so I know the team are reflecting on that. One thing I omitted to mention, sorry, you just triggered for me in terms of the efforts of our team. Last week we had 7 of our staff, I think it was at least 7, operating out of the Otorohanga emergency centre. And to your point about learnings, that was great to assist, but also there are learnings that came out of that for us. So absolutely, we've got to take lessons out of this and reflect on what we can do differently and better.
And the only real thing was the power outages, from a risk factor and the risk of wastewater treatment, what have you. And so you've basically covered it. But now it's farmers in the same boat. I've got a son-in-law that's electrician, and farmers were 5 or 6 days out Springdale Way and whatever. How they operate without a generator nowadays, it's just ridiculous. But so you don't have a problem with?
I think what I'm saying is we will review further. We have certain generators in place.
You've got one at Allen Street.
Yes, at the big pumper station down there.
Yeah, that you can take.
Yes, it can be put on.
So you've got, because it would be catastrophic if the power was to affect every place at the same time, wouldn't it? But if you've got something that can get there, so we don't have a mower point or whatever. It's a risk mitigation measure. But my question, I suppose, was, do we know the approximate cost of what the overtime, etc., the financial cost of the cleanup and everything was, and then if we took the last 2 or 3 events, averaged them out, etc., would that give us a flavour or an idea of what the amount would be to go towards an emergency or a reserve in order to have a budget to put aside?
Yes, thank you. There is a report coming to council on that event, including the total cost. I've had an indicative figure, but I don't like mentioning figures. I'd rather it be the right figure.
Yep.
So that will come to you. To the point about contingency funding, prior to the event anyway, the team had been considering that as a long-term plan issue, but just that this event just reinforces that. So we'll be producing some information to support and give you assistance to make a decision on that kind of approach, some resilience in terms of our budgeting to deal with events in a number of ways. It's recover our so if you look at our response, we had a lot of staff from different teams working on, for example, clearing debris. You raised the question of overtime. Absolutely right. That's an extraordinary cost. The fact that we had a RETIC person working on clearing trees during the day is not an additional cost. Charge it to the event, but with a true additional cost over and above what we've already budgeted. So that will come through in a report too.
Yeah, if I can just comment on that, because and reflecting on Jadine's meeting she had with the OAG, and they're talking about it, but it is a little bit, ironically, sort of, council should be putting money away for that, but also trying to keep to a 4% cap. And the other thing too on that, Andrew, I was talking to the mayor of Waipawa while it was happening, and see how he was going, Mike, and he was saying, he said, one engineer had a look at one of the problems that got washed away, and he said it's 20 million plus, just the one thing. So, once again, how much, and potentially if you're trying to get a contingency, like if there's, hopefully it never happens, but one thing out of the bag, and that would blow it again, so it's a hard one, and I'm not sure, at what level you set or you end up, because you could end up overrating too, because some of that's paying.
Oh, look, I completely agree, Mary Ash. I mean, and plus the requirement, we've got to put a contingency, not a contingency, but a fund aside for emergency management, under legislation now too, which is extra as well, and there's no extra funding for that as well. So the screws are on. So
Exactly. It's a hard one.
Yeah, I would say, good luck to people who choose to be elected members for the communities, and thank you very much in advance for your service. But nonetheless, I think it speaks to creating the resilience in the balance sheet that is not easy to do when the reform continues to happen and requires additional spend. But so I just wanted to check, what I'm hearing from you, Manaia, is that a paper will go to council so that there is an understanding of, I guess, what are the most significant risks to the Matamata-Piako community, overlaid with the lessons learned from what's happened at Mawao, considering landslide, Te Araroa as well. Also overlaid with what that could cost, and then having an understanding of the critical assets that could be at risk and what are the lifelines that impact each of those critical assets. So I feel like it's asking for quite a lot. So how are you going to shape that?
I was going to say that the first part of the first report is actually the event and the learnings and the direction, to the extent of all those other issues, and translating that into activity plans or provisions of the LTP. That is a bigger piece of work. So no, it won't cover everything that you'll see, but it's a starting point.
I just wanted to be clear that if you start writing that paper, it could turn into such a big thing. So being very careful about the scope of that, but then also considering, I'm guessing that we already have, what does the mayoral relief fund space look like? Is our policy continuing to be fit for purpose in that space? I think we've got that on our program for maybe the next meeting. So making sure that we're ahead of the curve versus scrambling afterwards.
And I was looking at a climate change action officer working alongside him as well. That's one of the things going forward.
And kudos to all those that choose to be CEs in local government as well. So, nonetheless, thank you very much. Were there any other questions? Any other questions on Manaia's report? The only other thing is I'll reiterate my comment from the top of the meeting, which is the due diligence, which I think you'll be exercising when you look at the debt guarantee for the water CCO. So nonetheless, I'm happy to move that report. Can I please have Mayor Asher seconding? All those in favour, please say aye. Against, for carry. Thank you. The next item is 8.3, which is insurance renewals. I think there's Roger in the room. Welcome, Roger. If you wouldn't mind giving us a brief summary of your report, which we'll take as read, and then we'll open for comments and questions from the committee members. Thank you.
Yes, good morning to you all. Good morning. Yes, I'd just like to highlight some key aspects from this report. And as you said, hopefully everybody's taken it as read. I don't know if you managed to wade your way through the appendices, but it does give the background of what we do as a Waikato group during the previous 12 months on every renewal. So the savings this year has been driven by a number of factors. As a group, we decided to go overseas more. We went to Singapore and London to to spread the risk away from New Zealand, and that's the issues within New Zealand were pushing up the basic premium costs. For those that have, well, I'm sure you all do have domestic insurance, you'll find that some of those have gone up by 20-30% this year. We've managed to keep the commercial insurances down to 10% overall below last year. So we've made a saving for the total portfolio of insurances, and that's by the bulk buying of 10 Waikato councils spread in the market, providing significant data so the actuaries can actually analyse what is the risk to the underwriters, and by providing that all information going to group and bulk purchasing, that is where we're making the savings. There has been a couple of changes over the last 12 months. The major one is that fines imposed under our statutory liability policy have been excluded from the policy. The government passed retrospective policy last August. Prior to that, with a statutory liability claim under the Resources Management Act, fines were insurable. They are no longer insurable. What is insurable is the legal costs in defence. Premium has actually stayed static, even though we don't get the same benefits. But the underwriters are saying that they view there is a higher likelihood of councils not pleading guilty, because historically some councils have pleaded guilty knowing their fines will be covered by insurance. Now they know they're not, they may be more inclined to plead not guilty and go to court, which means the defence costs, which will go up, but they are insurable. So the premium has stayed static. That's why it hasn't gone down. The vehicle insurance is down, even though we've increased the overall value of all council vehicles. And that's because that's based on claims, historic claims. And for this council, over the last 12 months, last 2-3 years, have actually been very low. So that's good health and safety practices, good driving practices. If I may, I'd just like to put an aside in this, which isn't the report. A month ago, KBS had a back to work introduction, and they invited the commercial branch of New Zealand Police and the traffic management. They indicated that they cannot recall ever having stopped a Matamata-Piako District Council vehicle in at least the last 20-30 years, which means there's a good process. So that is, so our risk management of driver and vehicle training tying down is really good, and that came from
this would exclude the former Mayor Piako, who I think may have been stopped for speeding on a number of occasions.
I think on more than one. Yeah.
What they did say: don't speed, don't drive drunk. Basically, and follow the road rules, and then they won't stop us. So, but I think that's a credit to the organisation and the staff in the organisation. There's a question. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Roger, for that. And I love the comments, team. If we could, or maybe it's deliberate, if we could use our buttons, that would be fantastic in terms of the people that are going to joyously watch our video later on. Thank you. And also remind us when we look at our terms of reference, that our role as a committee is to test the effectiveness of our insurance arrangements. So hopefully our questions go along that line. Over to you, Councillor.
Roger, just like to congratulate you on the saving for insurance. That's no mean thing. Question around the fine issue with no longer being covered by insurance under RMA. Under RMA, there's no statutory defence anyway, was there? It was black and white. You're either guilty or not guilty. So most, I'm thinking of businesses as well as councils probably just plead guilty because it was always going to be stacked against them to win against the RMA. With the new legislation coming through, Natural Planning Act, etc., is there more scope for defence in those sort of Do you know that?
I think the defence will be more on mitigating the penalty.
Which is much like the RNA, yeah, but it was about mitigating the penalty rather than pleading guilty or not guilty.
Yeah, I mean, under the Health and Safety Work Act, fines have never been insurable. It's always been.
Yeah.
So that's where, and if you look at the historic cases like White Island, when the penalties were imposed, it was based on the risk of that particular organisation and their policies. And that's where the defence comes in to assist with that process.
Yeah, but then some of those businesses pleaded guilty because they thought it was no good, and then a year or so later they appealed it and then got it revoked as well because they realised they did have a defence. Yeah.
It was a very unusual case.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Roger. No, it's good. You know, it has been a bit of a hobby course for me with the insurance, having worked with them for 30 odd years. But the only thing I'd comment is, yeah, it's great, you know, that we've got there's like a 10% saving or whatever that they equate to. But I'd still like the idea of going out to the market. The problem when you're using a broker, the IAG, which are Australian-based insurance underwriters, is you never know what's out there until you get other product. And, you know, I know we've been with Aon for, since I can even probably remember, which is great. But believe me, there, you don't know until you actually go out, you know, like I remember, they can tell you they're doing with the deal and all this sort of stuff, and they this and that and the other. And then until you get someone else maybe quote it, and sometimes it's 30% saved. So that's the only comment. I don't know the logistics of sending that out. I'm guessing you get a policy overlay. They must send you a policy as such that outlines everything with your excesses for the different components of the business. Sometimes it's as easy as you know, you can blank out the figures, but send that out to other companies. That's I think it's just a cross-checking thing. You know what I mean? Like, this is a great result, and I'm not taking anything away from that. Because any saving is a saving for the ratepayer. At the end of the day, it's brilliant. But if it's relatively easy to open up to other markets out there, then I'd suggest we can do that. Yeah, it's just a suggestion.
May I come back on that?
Yeah, that's
Look, I think Ken may add something to this. What I'd say is Aon is our broker.
That's right.
Aon goes to the market. And for instance, the material damage insurance, which is basically property insurance,
yeah.
I think there's 5 or 6 insurance companies that underwrite all that. We spread the love around, sort of thing. Also, there are 10 Waikato councils. If we start going out as MPDC, I'm not being negative, there's no way we'd ever achieve the savings that we currently get. I'm happy to go through that process if that's the desire of this committee to go through that. I wouldn't hold my breath for making any saving, and it will mean a lot of work, a lot of proposal forms to be completed. But yes, if that's the wish, I can do that. May I ask Ken, because Ken's been involved in the Waikato Lass & Co Lab for a number of years. He used to be chair of the committee that I was on. This is the insurance advisory group, and he can see it from another aspect, if that's okay, if he can speak.
Yeah, with the chair's indulgence, if I could just respond. So look, I guess what my primary response is that there is a large amount of competitive tension in our insurance cover every year. So look, for many years, for about 10 or 11 years now, we have been procuring the infrastructure insurance. So that's all of our pipelines, bridges, wastewater treatment plants, etc. We've been procuring that insurance over in the London market. And how that works is, yes, Aon is our broker. Aon introduces us to the market, but look, there's as many as 20 syndicates in the room all bidding for a piece of that cover. And then Aon is the broker, obviously does the big jigsaw puzzle, and a certain percentage of the cover is coming from one Lloyd's syndicate, and more is coming from another. So look, it's really widespread, really competitive, and we're getting some really good competitive tension in the equation. Aon is the broker. Every now and then, the local Waikato Insurance Advisory Group that I chaired up to about a year or so ago, it does actually put that to the market as well. But look, realistically, there's only two broking firms in New Zealand who are really able to bid for the brokerage of this. Certainly the last time we tested that, which I believe was about 5 or 6 years ago, it was a 2+2+2 contract. Aon certainly won that hands down in terms of the brokerage. I believe that next year, actually, I think that is we are due to go to market again for the brokerage. But I did just want to assure you that there is plenty of competitive tension in the equation. And I think Roger's paper also indicates that last year when we went for the current year's insurance, not only did we market the infrastructure insurance in London as we always do, and in Singapore, but we also marketed building type insurance. It's called material damage. Our material damage policies, which have traditionally all been insured in New Zealand, we reached out and exposed that to the London and Singapore markets. And got a good result. The last 2 years, we have had premium savings. Of quite significant premium savings. Sure, the market is softening, so that was very much in our favour. But look, there's a whole lot of factors that come into good insurance pricing. Actually, a lot of it is about relationship, which is why we do send somebody up to London and Singapore every year, because insurance is an interesting game. It is all done on the handshake. It is all done on trust. They do want to know that we've got good data on our assets, that we're managing our assets well, that our values are correct. And just going up into the London markets, looking at them in the eye, shaking the hand, that is actually worth a significant amount of discounting in terms of the premiums as well.
No, that's great. When you say insured in New Zealand, though, but there's no. So who's that through? Are you suggesting that underwritten by a New Zealand company, like as in, or when you say insured in New Zealand?
Yes. So basically, our insurance needs are they are put to New Zealand and Australian markets as well. So the large insurance companies in New Zealand, are also bidding to provide cover. But I'm just saying.
So talking FMG then.
IAG.
IAG is Australian too.
Yeah, IAG.
So I think the only New Zealand company is FMG, is the only.
So sorry, actually, in that regard, it could well be New Zealand representatives of international companies that are trading.
No, that's all good. Yeah. No, that's great result.
I just want to test something, Ash. Is the request in terms of going to market, MPDC going directly to market, or is it via the collab, I guess, collaboration for them to go to market?
Yeah, well, potentially, because I mean, any broker exists because they make money out of it. Okay, an example is Farmers Mutual Group. There's no brokers handle there where you can go to them direct, and there's probably a lot of farmers in the room that insure them, and that's where you can make significant savings. And that, whether I'm not suggesting that Farmers Mutual Group has the capacity to insure a council though, but sometimes you could go to like your Veros or a lot of. I mean, IAG is a group of insurance companies that covers Lumley, NZI, State Insurance, AMI, Pioneer, a raft of insurance companies are all IAG companies. And so, you know, all it is I'm happy. I'm not negative. This is great. This is great that it's finally going down, because if we talk about other fees today that keep going up, and so this is a great result. I'm not trying to be down on it, but it's always, we're trying to run the council. I believe the new councillors around the room are trying to be as prudent as we can, and it always pays to test, because sometimes, you know, I can give you an example where I was with an insurance company for 22 years, and they were like basically giving me a back massage saying, you know, you can add to your insurance, and you know, you get 50% off the premium for that one, and 40% off this, and 10% off that, until they gave another insurance company an opportunity to price that, a bigger cover, larger cover, more comprehensive cover, and it was 30% cheaper than the one I've been with for 22 years. And if you don't ask, you don't know. You know what that's all I'm saying.
Yeah. If I may, Aon do not clip the ticket on the premiums that we pay the insurance companies. The 10 Waikato councils have a fixed fee that we pay Aon for brokerage costs. That's it. So there's no markup from the premium point of view.
Yeah.
Insurance company.
Exactly.
Yeah. And look, through the chair, it may depend on the class of asset as well, Ash. So in terms of what you're describing, yeah, look, maybe in the category of motor vehicle assets or something, we could do that. But look, in terms of the Waikato collective, and in terms of the infrastructure space, we are taking every year we're taking to market. I think the last time I was involved 2 years ago, I believe it was $8.3 billion of assets that we were looking to cover on $8.3 billion of assets, because this is all the Hamilton's assets, all the other councils in the Waikato. It's pretty huge, and that's you know what that gives us the ability to enter into some of the overseas markets. Those overseas syndicates are interested when you're bringing a package of $8.3 billion of assets.
Councillor Bruce?
Sorry.
I have full confidence in what is being undertaken at the moment, because when you go into a group thing, you're actually increasing the size of it, right? And you're spreading the cover, and that's where you will get it, because if you've got 10 councils, right, the insurance companies will be far more amenable to doing that than taking a risk on just one. Right? That's how I see it.
That's correct. The insurance companies take it as 10 councils. The risk of 10 councils having catastrophic loss in one event is very rare, if not impossible. Well, I can't say that. But if it was just one council, that council's premium would have to cover all the claims for that particular council. Whereas what we've got at the moment is that 10 councils' premiums are covering the risk of one council.
Can I just respond to that, Dave, Roger? Yeah, I could be totally wrong on this, and that's all good. But if you think about what's happened in the last 2 weeks, and we've got 4 councils that are right on our doorstep that will be part of this, that are facing significant claims, I would be imagining. So I don't actually accept that. I'm thinking if you went out and say we've got, say for argument's sake, we've got $1 billion worth of assets, an insurance company where everyone's grouped in, and you're talking, you know, what was it, 8 billion or something?
I think from memory, 8.3.
Yeah, well, I would imagine that's more risk, you know, for an insurance company. That's only an opinion. I could be 100% wrong, and that's fine. That's all good. But I'm not always sure about that, because there's been a lot of, you know, Western Bay of Plenty, Tauranga, and you think about that, I think, yeah, it could be an interesting conversation.
It's a fair enough comment, Arash, but there is also a difference between claimable damage like to buildings and clean-up costs, which aren't insurable. So I agree, yeah, you can have widespread devastation, but is the damage to insurable assets widespread?
Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor James.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, no, look, I speak the work of CoLab, and I think we've got to be a collective around this insurance thing in terms of getting the best price. I'd love to hear, and sometimes through the price, I've found when I've kind of got comparisons for the farm, you know, sometimes the devil's in the detail. It's a bit harder to claim, or there's a lot more hoops to kind of jump through. But so it's not always price is important, but it's not always, you know what I mean? And so the ease of claim. I know that we have. I think we talked last time, maybe Roger, when you came in about insurance, about whether we can manipulate premiums with excess, etc., which is what a lot of people have been doing in the market. So I don't know if there's any scope there in terms of carrying some risk in terms of what we talk about with excess. But yeah, I wish that there'd been market softening with my insurance, to be honest. I don't think there has been. And my last comment was, if you do need someone to go over to handshake someone in London, I'm all over it.
You heard that too,
I'm all over it. Yeah.
I thought you'd be a Singapore guy.
No, I don't get it. Surely you'd stop at one to get to the other. I mean, just, yeah.
Okay, I'd just like to respond. Nice try. Excellent. Thank you.
You don't ask, you don't get.
Exactly. So I do take on board the economies of scale that Matamata-Piako does get in terms of being part of a collaboration, but I also agree with the sentiment of asking the question to ensure that we're getting the most effective deal in terms of insurance arrangements. But my questions are actually potentially process related. So we do not have an insurance policy, is that correct? In terms of a policy that governs how we do insurance, yeah. Correct. Yeah, just wanted to make sure. The next part will be around how do we align our risk appetite with the insurance arrangements that we have. And so my understanding is that's a work in progress. So I'm happy to defer that until the risk appetite audit has happened. I recall the last time we had talked about insurance, what I wanted to see is these are the types of insurance that we can take out. These are the ones that we have taken out. And this is the reason why we've taken out those ones. And then once we've selected which types of insurance we wanted, I wanted to see what is the bronze medal, silver medal, gold medal approach that we could take to each of those different lines of insurance. So we know as governors, have we chosen bronze or have we chosen gold? And so where can we make a choice along that spectrum? Yeah. Or to be fair, management will make that decision. Where has management made their choice along that spectrum? And then what have we decided to include or exclude in terms of those various line items? So that's the type of paper that I think would be helpful for councillors to see, to have a really good understanding of the insurance arrangements and what risk you are taking on and what risk you are not willing to take.
And Madam Chair, that could also align with, I've been speaking with Manaia and Councillor about it, around depreciation schedules too, whether they're aligned with your appetite for risk on those insurance items too, please.
Yes, and so if I can just comment then, the discussion, there's going to be a discussion this year about your risk tolerance in relation to our top risks. That's the connection we were making, but I think we could effectively, what I believe the chair is asking is the other point, to the point that you raised about the effectiveness of the cover, not just the value, whether it's effective, and there are a number of elements to that, including what isn't being covered that we could cover, and as you say, the extent of cover and what your risk appetite is in relation to that. In fact, the Office of the Auditor General issued a paper, I think it might have been, but they're quite old now, that it asked councils to reflect on certain things it felt it should be considering when that insurance has been taken. So I think it would be very timely for us to produce that report to align with that discussion on risk. And to your point, absolutely, insurance is one way of transferring risk. There are other ones. So I think we can connect that very well. Just wanted to get clear, however, in terms of the request about us testing our value. Have we got
think it's a rhetorical question. How do we test the effectiveness?
Okay, no, we can take that on board. Absolutely. Sorry. Thank you. So we'll bring back another, and we'll try and time this to fit in with our discussion on risk tolerance if we can, and that makes sense, complete sense to me.
Absolutely. But just before we go to the moving and seconding, and so my understanding, Benaya, is that the insurance is there's a bucket set aside for insurance in the, I guess, the budget process.
Yes.
And therefore, you as the CE or whomever is delegated has the responsibility to choose where on that spectrum that sits. I was just trying to understand where the role is. So this is coming to the Risk and Assurance Committee to say this is what we have done. Do you have any questions about that?
Well, I think for me, it's particularly appropriate to talk to the committee about your appetite and whether we've hit the right mark. Your council has indicated since it's the new council, you know, there's a view on risk developing, and that's why it's so good. We're going to get into that a bit more explicitly, and this is just one way. So I would be more comfortable that we check with you as to whether we're meeting your risk appetite on our insurance. So in the past, to be honest, we've renewed based on what we had. I think we did have a review about 2 years ago about taking on some more self-insurance in relation to buildings. So we have periodically, but I'm looking at perhaps a more structured framework which could then form the reports that come back to the committee annually. And as I say, I'm more than happy for the council. In fact, I would love to get council's direction on and the committee's direction on whether we're hitting the mark. That's obviously what we should be thinking about, is are we transferring the risk appropriately?
In broad terms there, I think we did discuss it even before, recently, and we said we still wanted to have cover rather than take a bigger risk. Is that not what
Yes, from my recollection, there was two aspects. One was on vehicles, self-insuring on vehicles.
Right.
The discussion there, it's not the cost of the vehicle, it's the cost of what you hit and what businesses you take out for 6 months. That's the cost. The other one was that the excess on property, material damage, it used to be 10,000, but as a group, it went up to 25,000, and that kept the premium static for a couple of years. There was some discussion about increasing that excess on a voluntary basis. Who might be able to say, I'm not sure if every council had to agree to go up to the same level or if it could be individual. The issue was there that to get any significant change in the premium, we'd have to be going $150,000 excess, which means any claim would have to come out of the operating costs of that particular year. And financially, for a number of councils, that just wasn't workable for them.
I think we also discussed potentially if we're trying to give staff more authority to make decisions and accountability, etc. Is there might be an increase in indemnity, professional indemnity insurance a little bit too, as a risk mitigation on that, in order to try and make council faster and more efficient, more business-like, I suppose, to make decisions. But that's we've talked about that as a council too, so that'd be part of it.
Absolutely.
Also, that will align to the risk appetite. So it's higher risk appetite.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, Mayor Ash, are you comfortable that we just with Stephen?
Yeah,
that's what and Mayor Ash is moving. I'm happy to second. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, Tuamana carry. Great cordial team. Thank you very much for drinking. The next item on our agenda is 8.4, which is the procurement biennial report. I think we have Cindy to yes, and Lania as well. And I suggest team then after that we do 8.5, which is the risk quarterly update, and then we break from the meeting. Thank you and welcome, ladies. If you wouldn't mind just giving a brief overview of the report, which we'll take as read, and then we'll open this up to questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So overall, the procurement audit identified very minor procurement non-compliances, and those were around the purchasing transactions. However, these issues present a very low risk to the council and can be effectively addressed. Overall, the report confirms that procurement activities are adding value to the organisation. And I'm happy to address any questions the committee has.
Thank you. Comments or questions from committee members?
Yeah, just got one, and it's actually going back to, just got one going back to actually the previous conversation. I see, speaking of insurance, Aon in our suppliers review, the top 10 suppliers by highest value, all under contract to NPDC, and Aon New Zealand Hamilton 1.237 million.
Yes, I just made a note of that while Roger was presenting his paper. So I believe that Aon, we're paying Aon not only for the brokerage, but for the overall. And what I understood is that we might be paying to different companies using Aon. So I would reflect that onto my next report.
Yeah, so, yeah, sorry, my simple mind, but can we get, so the 1.2 million, because that's not, going back to the other slide, so how is that made up? Is that 1.237 million? I mean, the premium is 1.39, whatever it is. So that's not the premium. So it's, yeah, if you could just get some clarity around that, like, please. It just sort of figures it's standing out for me. Sorry to go on about it, but it's just, yeah, to clarify.
So look, so I'm not 100% sure because I'm not that close to it here. But look, what you're seeing on that report will be the premiums, because the insurance renewal is from 1 November to the following 31 October. So in this procurement report, it will be picking up the premium. In terms of the brokerage for Aon, it's in the tens of thousands. It's certainly not in the millions. You're saying premium.
No, that's all right. Yeah, what kind of tens of thousands are we talking? Not a yearly.
Actually, the chief executive said a little bit earlier he didn't like quoting figures off the top of his head. I don't think it's much beyond about 10,000. So
it's fine. It's just that I always like the figures and stuff like that, and I was looking at the two to just drew it out. It's not a witch hunt or anything like that. It's just clarity. That's all. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for that.
Thank you. I'll just make sure that this reflects properly onto the following report.
I have a couple of general questions. And the first one relates to, I was talking about this to Vinaya this morning, until we're utilising artificial intelligence to improve the workflows that we have across council, including procurement, so that we can get some efficiency savings. Maybe it's from Vinaya. So.
Yes, if I could answer that, because it's that we've got a project which we call the SEBS project, it's Smarter, Easier, Better, Safer. And under that particular project, we have a specific aim to use technology to improve our processes, to really leverage off the opportunity, of which one step of that was moving the organisation to the M365 space, and another leg of that is use and incorporation of AI into the organisation. I think we've got 25, something like 30 licenses in the, I just can't remember the number off the top of my head, but 30 licenses in the organisation, of which we are basically piloting how we can use AI. And then we're ready for the second tranche of that coming up, so another 20 to 30 licenses. The concept is that we try and deliver two types of digital enablement. One is very structured using our digital enablement team, our business analysts, and our applications developers. And so, for example, just as an example of one of the projects that we've using AI, we've developed an application where any manager can query on any HR related policy to get an answer what our policies actually, what our policies might apply. So for example, I've got a staff member going on maternity leave. What are the conditions going to apply? Give me the answer type thing. Most of those questions go directly to the PSW staff at the moment. So, and these are the kinds of questions that our managers have said, we'd like better guidance beyond the procedure. So that's being driven through the digital enablement team, very structured way. The other way we're delivering it is like people like me in my job, what can I do differently using the licensing? That's kind of the piloting approach that we're doing. So we're not rolling those licenses out to everybody. It is a key strategy for us, and was identified as a key strategy for us in the long-term plan. And council allocated a certain amount of funding to us to deliver that over a 3-year program, with the condition that we return that in some tangible way. This annual plan, that's 26-27, is the first example of where we're delivering that tangibly. What do I mean by that? I am taking a risk that we will not be able to have to replace certain staff because technology will enable us to do things differently, and we've made a provision in the annual plan for that. So that's really long-winded. We haven't got to the procurement space yet, but we've got 150 projects actually we've identified on our SEBS list. In addition to that, we've got people doing great things. I think Steph's doing some, but certainly people in this room who are doing great things with Copilot, because the power comes from delivering it to the coalface.
Thank you for that. I raise it as well because it's an opportunity to have that discussion when we're talking about risk appetite and potential loss of opportunity. To me, AI seems to be a tool that can be utilised so that councils can exercise their own tēnōranga tīwhetanga or self-determination versus having things pushed to them. So again, thank you for that. The other question that I had was really in terms of when I've seen the Office of the Auditor General reports, predominantly they're on procurement and conflicts of interest. So has there been anything that has come out of this particular space that you might think might land us in one of those reports in not a very positive light?
Can I comment? What I would say is, particularly on our larger procurements, we have the project team and Fiona's group have involved more intense probity advice. So because of the risk. So what is an example of that? The waste management contract is an example of that. The Matamata treatment plant was another example of that. The Matamata, and so that is quite large costs, but a smaller example of that is the Matamata playground, where we're in a partnership with a community group, which is in terms of the procurement, and so that produces particular types of challenges. So what I'd say is that where Sangeeta has helped our team is to flag, I think you need to. So I think she's been quite proactive in doing that, and I've seen that happen. I wouldn't say that we probably could do more in that space. Or Sangeeta may wish to comment on that.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that recently I have developed a guide on probity that educates people around what probity is and how it could be managed. And for very high value procurement, I have a template that the project managers need to use as a checklist and attach to the procurement plan. So when it comes to the tender board for approval, I make sure that those ticks have been applied. Otherwise, it should go back to the project managers to work on that and get back for approval.
Thanks, Sangeeta, because I think you're doing great things in that space. And I'm just trying to make sure that we're also aware of there are other things that could impact us, so to lift our heads sometimes and think, what else is out there? Sorry,
that's right. My one comment is probably around the non-compliance, Sangeeta. I just see it's 15% now, and you say it's minor and procedural in nature, which I accept, that's fine. But will we get some assurances that, with the extra training set, that'll drop? Because I'd feel much more comfortable if that margin per error was under 5%.
So basically, when I joined, the margin was really high, and then it gradually went low. But when I do conduct my audits, I do assess what were the things that they have failed to, which has actually brought up to the non-compliances. And some of the failures would be that they would have a quotation, but they would have failed to attach it to the authority or the procurement ERP. So those are the minor sorts of non-compliances.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that you're doing great work in that space, and I think it all comes down to you can develop a great process, but it's up to us mere mortals to follow it. So nonetheless, thank you for the work that you do, and our recommendation is that we receive your report. I'm happy to move. I'll be your councillor Andrew seconding. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is our quarterly risk report. And no pressure, Ken, but you're standing between us and wanting to. So taken as read, but brief comments are welcome. Thank you.
But believe me, I'm feeling that pressure. But it's good. And look, I just want to draw to the committee's attention that we do have Dave Robson on the team. So yeah, he's just joined for this item. Yeah, because he does have quite an interest and input into this space. So welcome, Dave, as well. Yeah, look, I will just quickly walk you through the report, and then I'm very happy to take any questions. So look, page 61, just drawing your attention to our risk management work plan. So in this risk management space, we are working according to a work plan, and you can see sort of 3 key items there. There is very little update for this quarter. However, you can see that on all 3 of those actions, we are coming back to you at the June RAG meeting, so at our next meeting, certainly with a good update in regard to the 2nd and 3rd items. And then actually the results of our risk maturity assessment, which we're looking for Dave to actually run. He ran one last year. That's provided us a benchmark, so we're looking forward to that to see the improvement. We're anticipating improvement in terms of risk maturity. Over the page, so page 62 of your agenda. Look, I thought it would be helpful because look, to ensure this committee's focus is in a good place. Top risks are really important. So look, I'm a great believer in an annual reset of the top risks. So you'll see on page 62, we are programming some things so that we can give our top risks a really solid reset. And the other thing that I'm really keen to draw into the process this time is, in fact, we've talked about it at length earlier in this meeting, is it's been mentioned on several occasions, is a setting of risk appetite. So you can see a bit of a program April, May through to June and concluding in October. That sees this committee and in effect actually this committee recommending through to council and council setting its risk appetite and setting the top risks for the year, and essentially that will govern the reporting coming to this committee over the next year. Okay, so wanted to draw your attention to that. Chair, page 63, there were a couple of questions that were asked at our December meeting, and in fact the questions did come from the chair. So just the intent there in terms of how we respond to those. So the first was the question over, we've got some top risks where the actual current residual risk after any mitigating factors is actually in excess of where we see the risk appetite. So hey, how do we manage that? And are there implications with that? So so look, the suggestion is that when we deep dive these top risks, that we will particularly focus in on that space, and you do have a couple of deep dives later on this morning. So I think that's a really good opportunity to test it. And also I think in June when we reset the top risks, let's make that a focus. Where there are gaps, why are there gaps? Have we actually assessed the settings correctly? The other one was, any failures of top risk controls, because it's wonderful to have these controls, but look, if we know there's a failure, do we escalate that up, or how do we escalate that up? So look, I was suggesting here that we actually come back every meeting with some positive assurance in regard to either there are no known failures of these key controls for the top risks, or if there has been, that obviously we highlight those. Risk 2 is disruption to essential service delivery. Top risk 9 is failure to respond appropriately to political change. Look, I just think, and there's a little note at the bottom of page 64, there is so much happening in both of those spaces at the moment, in terms of the government's reform program, and in terms of our movement, or our transition of the waters business into another entity, into the organisation having to be really, really focused on that space. Look, I just think those risks are trending up. I'm not saying that the actual residual risk has necessarily increased. The assessment may still be fine, but look, that's that is a space that where things are changing, and the risk is definitely trending up. Very interestingly, that quite independently, and actually, Dave, I know that you might need to cut away really soon, but maybe that's a really good segue into page 76, emerging risks, because quite independently, Dave from Aon has produced this information on page 76, and he has very much picked up on these as his number 1 and number 2 kind of high emerging risks. So look, I think council is putting a lot of focus into this space, including at executive team level. But look, that's a really good test. While I was saying, hey, I think the risks are trending up. Dave's identified those as emerging risks. So with the chair's indulgence, Dave, do you just want to talk about page 76 on that emerging risk table?
Yeah, sure. And morning, everyone. Thanks for having me along. Yeah, it is really sort of reassuring that everything seems to be trending at the same place, and this, the work that you're already doing and the emerging stuff seems to be merging together, and that's a really good sign that you're onto it. In terms of the emerging risks that I've listed there, I don't think there should be any big surprises in there. I mean, we kind of all know what's going on with the water reforms and the transition, but also you've kind of got that. I think that sort of financial juggling at the minute, where we're looking at debt, we're looking at rates capping, all these sort of things. There just seems to be so much happening in the sector at the same time, which is difficult, I guess. But there's some issues to manage amongst that. But yeah, I just, like I say, I'm happy to field any questions. But I kind of thought as I was writing these that there shouldn't really be any surprises. But yeah. Happy to field any questions.
Thanks, David. Good to see you again. It's been a long time. We were at the same meeting yesterday, or forum yesterday in Wellington, so good to see you again.
I'd just like to say hello to the Silver Fox, Dr. Dave, as well. So it's been a long time no see.
Oh, I will be at the next one. Unfortunately, we just had a little bit of timetabling issues on that one, but I'll take the Silver Fox, though. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments. Are there any comments in relation to the emerging risks?
James? No, I don't have a comment in regard to that, Madam Chair. It's just in terms of Ken's timetabling, wanting to have a workshop session, April, May. Just my plea is always to have plenty of notice, and I'm just wondering why, if we're all in the room and you have dates that could be suitable, would that be practical to actually set the date today rather than trying to hang around a whole lot of emails and sort that out?
Yeah, Yeah, so through the chair, I guess I was going to work with our governance team in that space and essentially probably look to a Wednesday because I know you do have this council has workshop sessions on a Wednesday. I mean we'll probably have to touch base with the chair if because we'd be looking for the chair to be involved as well, and obviously your calendar may not be quite so easy to coordinate, but we'd be looking to marshal it into a Wednesday.
Great.
So
if it's into a Wednesday, that's fine.
Yeah, should be business.
For those of us with other work, need lots of notice.
Cool. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for the suggestion. So, were there any questions for David in terms of his emerging risks, or any questions for Ken?
No, they seem logical, don't they? So, and relevant and up to date.
Just one thing, just under the top risks update, and I just noticed a comment, and it was, it's talking about the rates collection and stuff like that, and the overdue rates and some that have fallen behind. And I know the staff do a great job of trying to get people into, weekly payments, monthly payments, and this and that, offering solutions and that. But just see it makes a mention of some long-standing arrears where no mortgage exists over the property, approximately 5 properties currently, but it's got collection via a rating sale could be considered. Can you elaborate on that? Is that houses, or is it abandoned properties, or what's the story with that?
I'd have to look at exactly what it is, to be honest. I'm not sure what the properties are.
Yep.
We're on page 72.
Correct.
Yeah, 72.
I can find it. I can find that out, information out for you.
That's fine.
We haven't done rating sales. I can't think of any that I've done. So it's not something we jump to. I would suggest there are a few properties and where nothing moves, and so it's right that the staff raised that with me.
Because I was on the understanding that if a place was mortgage free, I know if there's a mortgage on it, the banks can actually pay us, and then they add it to the mortgage. I get that, but I was under the understanding, and I could obviously be wrong, but if there's no mortgage exists, basically the only powers we have is through debt collection agency or something like that.
No.
Oh yeah. So certainly debt collection agency is an obvious choice. If we can't secure the payment after pursuing that, there are certainly powers under the rating legislation for us to potentially secure permission to do a rating sale. But look, it's quite a process. So I mean, we have the power. But it involves a high court process to work through to actually achieve that. So it is very much a last resort type thing. And actually, to be honest, Mary, so I have had a little bit of experience in that space, and often actually as council initiates the high court process, it actually is a trigger for the to all of a sudden cooperate, like they can fob off debt collectors, but when you start taking an action to the High Court, all of a sudden they decide it is a good idea to pay their rates to them. So so often you don't actually get right to that solution. Even just working towards that solution achieves the result.
No, that's great. Hey, just one little comment, and I don't know others have noticed it, but some of the I love the graphs and the figures and the things like that, but they're pretty small. Like the writing seems to be getting micro from even years ago. Whether I'm getting blind or I'm not sure. But
pick a glasses.
I don't need binoculars, but and I know we can go like that, but it is when you're going through like big agendas, it is quite. I'm just wondering, because it looks like you can actually make them bigger if you look at the size of the page as well. And it's just it would make it a little bit easier because some of this is important data, and I'd hate it to get lost. Or if it's not possible, even if you can print out some of them or whatever. And I know everyone's we don't want to go back to paper ones, but
Yeah.
It's just if we can just, because I noticed that there's more and more of them coming through now,
Yes.
and they're like, you know,
Yeah. So through the chair, look, there is great feedback.
No,
Mary, thank you for that. So look, it's a bit of a trade-off between trying to limit the number of pages versus the size of the graphs. But look, on the basis of what you've just said, perhaps if you're happy for maybe this report to be 3 or 4 pages longer, we can actually make the graphics a bit more readable. So I mean, is that a general feeling? Because I'll certainly take account of that for next time.
Well, I just push on the plus on the computer.
That also helps.
Yes, you can expand it out, but look, for the sake of 2 or 3 extra pages on this report, I'm sure we can actually make it a bit more readable. So yeah, we'll look to do that. Thank you.
Cheers.
I have a question for David while he's still online, and it's to do with the emerging risks. And given the experience that you have across various councils in New Zealand, is there anything that you're seeing across those spaces that might be relevant for Matamata-Piako District Council? So when they see the emerging risks, are they saying, well, what about this and what about this? Is there anything that they're identifying that falls outside of what you've offered as emerging risks for here?
I mean, that's a great question, and I think the short answer is not really. I think the differences in terms of patterns is the actual the timing of the risks. That seems to be what's coming and going. So we seem to be moving away from more short-term things. You know, where we're saying like, you know, like knee-jerk kind of legislation changes, something like that. They seem to be being slowed right down. And I don't think we're quite in the long term at the moment, but definitely I think across the sector, the emerging risks are much more that kind of that medium term. So maybe, you know, the next year ahead rather than the next few weeks ahead. But in terms of content, not a lot different going across the councils other than the things that we're already talking about. I mean, you know, we're talking about that sort of real up in the air stuff, you know, regional council sort of position, that sort of thing. But there's nothing. Yeah, I think that is to answer your question, it's a timing thing that's all across the sector, and it's really pushing out to that medium term. Long term, I would say that, you know, 2 years plus sort of thing. It's definitely under that, but certainly over month to month stuff now. So yeah.
Right. Thanks, David. Appreciate that. Kevin, sorry. Ken, my next question is for you. On page 61 of the report, it talks about business resilience, and it talks about our further review of business continuity plans. But I just wanted to lean into a conversation that was happening before around power failure and then impact on plants. And to me, it strikes as an opportune time to think about our business continuity planning, how robust that is. And that to me feels like something that we might want to be having a conversation or a refresh about. But I see that it's planned for June, but just acknowledging that I think there might be some things that we might want to get across sooner rather than later.
Yes, yeah, no, thank you for that, Chair. So look, there is some work that's already happening in that space. But yeah, for instance, David on the screen there has actually had a really good look. David, I believe at the water business continuity plans. Yeah, you were looking at those just before Christmas.
I think it was waters and maybe cemeteries.
Cemeteries, yes. Yeah. So there is quite a bit of work that's been done there in terms of a desktop review. But I guess what we are also looking to do is to kind of tie that into a business resilience framework, which of course is picking up on very much on the business continuity space, as well as crisis management and general risk management aspects. So a bit of blended work, but building up a framework at the same time as review of those very specific plans, and potentially building a template that across the organisation, we can actually give those business continuity plans a refresh, because I understand it's quite a few years since they were last refreshed.
Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to also recognise I knew that work was happening in that space, but we need to give ourselves assurance that something is happening.
Yes.
So thank you very much for that. The other thing that I would say is I know that our maturity in the risk management space is developing. I'm not sure about others, but I found it quite a tough read to go through the KRIs. Don't get me wrong, I appreciated them, but when there isn't a consistency in terms of approach of how those are presented, it's quite a hard read to do a comparison of one to the other. I'm not asking for anything to necessarily change in that space because I know that we are developing, but just similar to the point that was made before, being considerate of how the reader might receive the information and what might make it easier to digest. But if other committee members have comments about what works for them as well, feel free to share them with the team. The other thing that I would say, Ken, is when we're thinking about the structure of how we're going to do reporting on risk management, I know that we'll do the deep dives. I know that from what you were saying, we'll have an annual reset of the risks. So how are we ensuring that across each of those top 11 risks that we have, that we've got a really good understanding of what are the critical things that could go wrong in that space? What are the critical controls that are going to mitigate that? And are those controls effective? So how are we, if you can turn your mind to how are we going to give that assurance to this committee so that we feel confident that things are in train?
And potential outcome.
Because at the moment we've got the top 11 risks, we've got a sense that nothing has failed across those top 11. And then we've got some KRIs and then we've got 2 deep dives. So if we're going to be changing or refreshing those risks on an annual basis, how do we continue to maintain the lens across those, especially if we're only going to be deep diving every 2 years?
Yes.
I don't have a solution for you, but I'm happy to work with you offline in terms of what that could look like. But nonetheless, I do want to appreciate all the work that has been done. We are moving through a more mature space, but yeah, just asking ourselves those questions. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Noted. Yep.
Any further?
Okay, a question for Dave actually. What's an appropriate time for reviews on the key risks? I mean, you know how the Chinese do their business plans every 3 months now, basically. Should we be looking at 6 monthly, yearly, biannually? And I suppose it depends on the risk too, doesn't it?
All of the above. I mean, I guess it depends on a number of things. Have you actually had any cause to sort of review that risk because of an event that's happened or anything like that? But if nothing's happening and it's all plain sailing, yeah, look, I'm a kind of big sort of advocate for that 3 to 6 month thing. I think maybe a year is a little bit long to look at a risk, but there's a lot of moving parts in these risks. So even if maybe breaking them up into certain pieces, whatever works for you really. But yeah, I think a year is maybe a little long. 3 to 6 months, like I say, if it's plain sailing. But if if you have had a few twitches on the line between now and I would probably push those ones to the top of the list to look at. It's just a stitch in time stuff, really.
Aren't we talking about the risk manager keeping a very close eye on that and then bring it to our attention if they do become an issue, isn't that?
Yeah, I'm just talking about reviewing, not.
Yes, but who's reviewing? What I'm getting at, who's reviewing? The risk manager or the risk committee?
Well, they bring it to our attention. They review it, and then and then we from a governance point of view, we sort of overview it.
Okay, I would have just seen it where the risk manager identifies that there's an or the emerging risk or the risk is getting higher and should bring it to our attention at the next meeting, and then just
but then it's up to us to decide: do we need to adapt the strategy to be able to?
You're both right.
I'm just looking at where the process is that. Yeah.
No, you're both right. They have that sort of working business as usual process of risk management, of reviewing and looking at risks on a regular basis. I think these deep dives are an excellent initiative, and I would really, really encourage you to keep doing those. And that's where you would come into it. As you say, if there is any change or if there's a reason to change that risk rating, it would come to you. But like I say, if things are pretty sedate in that area, and it comes up for a deep dive, yes, it comes back to you again, but it would be on a much longer basis, sort of like a 6 monthly thing. But you're both quite right.
Yeah. it's up to the risk team to look into that, but it's up to us to give them the guidance about what we're going to see, how often we're going to see.
Yeah, and look through the chair, I guess that's the value of just sort of testing the trend on those top risks, you know, on a quarterly basis, both with the executive team and with this committee, and it's the value that that Aon bring, and particularly David, in terms of that emerging risk space. Yeah, because yeah, you're right, things change, yeah, you know, risks increase or decrease over time. Yeah, new things emerge that we you know, we might not necessarily have seen coming. Yeah, the idea is to get onto those on a very timely basis. Yeah, so important this gets really good focus for this committee report.
Thanks very much, Ken. There being no further questions, we'll move to the recommendation, which I think there are two. One, that we received the report and we received the quarterly risk report. I'm happy to move, but if there's ever second, we have me seconding. All those in favour, please say aye. Okay. I took that really fast. I apologise. I must have been really hungry, wasn't I? Nonetheless, thank you very much. Thank you, David. Great to see you.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Appreciate it. So, yeah, morning tea team, and we'll see you back in 15 minutes. Thank you. you to the team that provided that for us. Oh, is it? I had a request if someone could sing.
Happy birthday to Ellie. Yeah.
Oh,
You wanted to sing, but anyway.
Can we just acknowledge?
Or is that a bit of too much of a risk to our ears? Okay, all right.
Way too much.
Briefly, Willem.
So when's the 21st party?
21st party, yes.
21 next year.
So birthday greetings or birthday wishes, I should say, as well, from the committee. And in terms of returning to the agenda of today, we're on item 8.6, which is our top risks deep dive into legal non-compliance. So welcome, ladies, and I'll hand it over to you guys in terms of giving us a brief update or an outline of the paper, and then we'll open for comments and questions. Kia ora. Okay, Ellie.
Well, no problem at all. Thank you for having us. So we came at the end of last year and not too much has changed. So because of the broad system that we operate under and the numerous different departments that we have been looking at the likelihood of non-compliance due to human error, system limitations and asset failure. And we recognise that there's currently a gap between the residual high risk rating and the stated appetite, which is low, and whether there is the ability to bridge that gap or how much we can bridge that gap, given that human error and other things like that are just bound to happen and system failures. There is not always something you can do to remedy or mitigate those when they do occur. And I understand that the Risk and Assurance Committee is scheduled to review the risk ratings later this year, roughly in June, where this can be considered a bit further and whether it's a realistic idea that we have at the moment. And you asked us last time to look into specifically through the legal regulatory lens, and we did do that before we came here. But which is what I was mentioning earlier about physical asset failures and operational service delivery issues, water discharges, things like that. And you are getting a disruption to essential services delivery, risk number 2, which you'll hear about, I think it's today, or is it another time potentially. But that will cover those sort of risks that we have, and we don't feel that they do fit fully under this legal compliance. And yeah, due to the consequences, we believe that the inherent risk rating does remain very high. We have looked at public image or newspaper articles and things like that and how we manage that reputational harm. And we are still trying to consider if there is a better alternative to how to manage that or mechanisms we can use to maintain or track it at least. But you are hearing from me later on in regards to local delegations and which plays part into legislative compliance, and that will be on later today, which is part of our framework of how we're managing this legal risk. But on the whole, that is most of the updates for now.
Thank you. Do we have any comments or questions? So what I would say is this is our opportunity to think about the risk that is presented to us, think about the controls that are in place to mitigate that risk from happening, and our role in this particular committee is to kick the tires on those controls to give a sense of assurance that they're effective in mitigating that risk. So this is our opportunity, and depending on Ken's timing, it may only come once a year or who knows. So this is our real opportunity for us to ask questions. I'll ask a couple because I know that there's a lot of work that goes into this space, so thank you. The first one is we've talked a lot today about collaboration with other councils, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is also one of the top risks of the majority of councils that surround us. So do we have any sense of, not to say that we need to follow up this, but do we have any sense of if they're doing anything different in relation to this particular risk that we could potentially learn quickly.
Off the top of my head, it's only in regards to other systems that councils have in place to help manage it that I'm aware of. I don't know for the councils that don't have something like Comply With or the opposite or alternative system. I am unsure about what they are doing or how they are managing and whether their systems, because when I was talking with Comply With, when we were looking at that, is that they mentioned that time and time again, councils who would start had systems similar to what we are currently using. And so my suspicion is that a lot of councils are undertaking what we currently do, which is staff sign off and say, yes, we are compliant, and yes, we believe we are adhering to our requirements. And that is the extent of it.
And just magically today, Debbie happened to give me something that was said here from compliance, which I think everybody has received. But in saying that, do we have a sense of the people that utilise the system, whether that would be a beneficial system for us for this particular space?
Yes, so we did look into this, and we just recently sent it to the SEPS group, and they reviewed it, and it's out of a rating of 9. We got a 7 out of 9, which means it is not an immediate want or something we'll do immediately. It will be 18 months or more in the time frame, but it is recognised as a 7 as but what we are also planning on doing is the executive team to look at it from a different lens. SEPs look at it from what is the public view, how does it help the public and their view, and then the executive team are able to look at it from what is the council risk involved in the inherent risk that this could be filling that gap of. So there is a different lens, and we'll be looking at that in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you. And the only other comments I would make is I was thinking about what would if I was walking into the organisation blind, what would I expect in this space? And the first thing would be to understand what your obligations were, what's your system in place to advise of those obligations, training your people, doing a self-assessment, and then potentially your regulators would come in and tell you where you haven't quite met the mark. But I think it speaks to the wider piece, which is when we do the risk appetite space, that will really give us a sense of where we sit on that spectrum. And to Councillor Andrews' point before, whether we're, I guess, willing to push the boat out a bit more in different spaces. So there being no...
Well, actually, I was just looking, Madam Chair, I was just sort of saying, yeah, we have a low risk appetite now, but our risk tolerance it's outside of appetite, obviously. Do we either address that by changing our risk appetite, or do we address that by maybe modifying our key risk indicators and pulling them back a little bit?
So, great question. So, in regards to it could be either. I guess, as this report indicates, we're on a journey in terms of our legislative compliance. As within this report, and also coming to you later, we've moved to local delegation, which we think is helping us on that journey. We're also investigating Comply With, which will continue us on that journey. As noted in the report, we do think that is a low appetite in this area achievable given the complexity of the organisation. So one option is to increase our appetite. Is that the right way? Decrease our appetite, whichever way, move it up to, say, a medium. And I do think with some of as we go through this journey and we learn more and put more systems and robustness in place, we will obviously be able to reassess where we are in that very high. So it can be a two-way street is probably what I'm saying.
Yeah, I suppose the question is our key risk indicators aren't bound by legislation, so we can adjust them where and as necessary.
Absolutely, and at the moment, the one around the negative media, it is we don't necessarily see that as a really true indication, because even if council are following the legal process, we still may have negative media for our actions, because in most legal areas, there's going to be those two sides of the story. Probably one party isn't going to be happy with our action, and therefore we're likely to get negative media. If the committee has any other suggestions in terms of how we can measure our success, we're very open to that. We have been trying to work on what other, rather than that indicator, what other indicators we can put in, but we are just at a little bit of a loss. But we're going to also look at other councils to see what they've done. We've had a conversation with Ken as well, what we can do in that area.
I was just going to comment about this is a sign for me of how the risk framework is really bringing home and enabling us to focus on some key questions, because we're out of risk tolerance here and we're out of risk tolerance in other areas. And for me, I can't help thinking it is about being a bit more explicit about what low means or what medium might mean, and how that. So what I mean by that? I know that on our legal compliance schedule right now, there are particular provisions in there where we have acknowledged we do not comply strictly with. Okay, we've made it very explicit on there. But in looking at that, we've also made an assessment, if you like, explicitly, that we're prepared to accept that risk because the potential consequence of that is not high. So I'm looking forward to how we go through the risk appetite, and I'm saying this as a learner, not as a knowing the outcome. I'm looking forward to the process of giving those risk levels a bit more context and texture, so that we can actually say, well, yeah, here are all these things over here that we don't comply with. If we look at those in the context of our business, they may or may not be. You may be more than comfortable about that those things are at risk because of the consequence of those. Because to say that we will always comply with all legislation is just not achievable. That's the team is saying. Yeah. Get down to low risk. So I'm really looking forward to putting some texture around that, because, and here's an example of another one. Sorry, if I can just give you another example. Our highest risk is IT cybersecurity, because of the environment that we live in, and it's constantly under attack. Now we'll get down. I'm absolutely confident we'll get down to the risk tolerance level we've set, but we could go further. But the actual cost of going that extra step is probably not going to be justified. It's just examples of where the framework is driving our focus to be more explicit about this risk. So I don't have the answer, but I'm looking forward to the conversation.
I agree with you around the law of diminishing returns. I mean, you can hammer it and hammer it and spend a shitload of money and get a marginal increase. It's not worth it. But I'd suggest that it's like negative media is a key risk indicator. I mean, that's, in my mind, that's reasonably subjective. I mean, you've got the old saying, all publicity is good publicity too. So yeah, I'd be looking at strictly objective key risk indicators.
Yeah, and that's our thinking too. Yeah. We don't think that truly represents how well we're doing or not doing.
Yep.
Look, really, I just like the fact that we've actually identified it and say, yeah, it can't. It's not fallen off the radar. It will get a focus at some stage. It's really.
And I just want to reiterate the thanks for the work that's been done in this space, and I really look forward to the risk appetite discussion, because to Manaya's point, being compliant with all legislation is cost prohibitive. And given the affordability concerns of our communities, I think it's a conversation that needs to be had sooner rather than later. And it might end up looking like which piece of legislation might create more risk to our organisation and which one should we focus on more. Nonetheless, thank you for your work, and the recommendation that is that we received the report. The Ash is moving. Do we have a second? Councillor Andrew is seconding. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, comment carried, and happy birthday. Thank you. So we'll move on to item 8.7 on our agenda, which is another deep dive This one being in terms of disruption to essential service delivery. Welcome Fiona and Erin. So we'll hand it over to you guys to give us a brief update about your paper, and then we'll open for comments or questions from the committee members. Thank you.
Morning, everybody. Sorry, quickly. Good morning, everybody. We're here to talk about a deep dive risk number 2, which is the risk of disruption to essential services within MPDC, and those include water, wastewater, stormwater, and roading. The report that you have seen, you'll notice concentrates on predominantly the 2 waters, water and wastewater. And you'll also notice that the risk ratings that are contained in the original report are very high, which is exceeding Council's existing risk appetite. The key drivers behind those risks are aging infrastructure, the ever-increasing regulatory pressures that we're facing from Matamata-Piako and the Waikato Regional Council, workforce constraints, and what everybody knows is the ever-increasing climate-related events that we're getting, where we're getting more severe events, weather events, and more often. The report talks also about some of the remedies that we could apply in terms of reducing the inherent and latent risk that we've got, to bring it closer to Council's risk appetite, which is the likes of significant long-term investment, redundancy in systems, better technology and emergency preparedness, and reductions in failures due to operational changes and maintenance practices. You'll also see in the water space, the consequences of failure are pretty severe. The top one being obviously people's health, and then after that, environmental health, as well as the risks that we face in terms of non-compliances when it comes to financial risk for council, and or reputational risk as well. What we thought was very good can suggest that we put in something in this latest report that talks about the gauge of our current preparedness. So we actually had a good opportunity during the recent weather events to stress test our systems, and we found ourselves to be probably better prepared than what we had anticipated, which was a very, very good outcome for us. So that was related to knowing what was coming, and putting measures in place to mitigate the consequences. Compliance and performance and regulator confidence has improved over the last 6 months or so, which is very good for us as well. So we've been taking a lot of guidance from Matamata-Piako and Waikato Regional Council, and our current controls are predominantly related around asset management and monitoring, the condition of all of our assets, what have been knowing what we've got out there, how it performs, trying to better predict failure and the consequence of failure. And we have a number of systems that enable us to do that. We've got a reasonably good asset management systems. We've got SCADA, which is monitoring our sites 24/7, even if we experience the likes of power failures and what have you. We have good access to secondary contractors, generators, so on and so forth. And going forward, even though we're heading towards Waikato waters, there will be a lot of stuff that will be transferring over there in terms of planned improvements, but it's something that we're still working on very hard, and we'll be working hard on that until the day that we migrate. So that's an overall summary of the report you have in front of you.
Thank you.
comments or questions from committee members? Again, reiterating this might be our only one chance this year to actually dive deep into this particular strategic risk and obviously a critical one.
I just note, yeah, a lot of the stuff you're discussing down seems to be like BAU, and then obviously observation sets and everything as well. So, but it was good to see for the recent events that we're either effective or partially effective on pretty much most things. So I mean, and that's probably the risk around infrastructure here are those bigger events, rather than probably a straight out structural failure, because you'll be monitoring them as a BAU anyway. So
Yes.
yeah, so I just wanted to compliment you on that, and keep up the good work.
Thank you very much, and it's a testament to a team that's grown massively over the last 12 to 18 months. So, and the team is really up for it. So, and that's in preparedness to go to Waikato Waters and make sure that we will effectively look after MPDC's interests there whilst looking after the wider region as well. So, thank you for that. We appreciate that.
Yep.
All that into account, if we look at the most recent thing nationally was the was it Moa Point and what have you, which can you just give me an expert's opinion of what happened there, right? And that there's an assurance that the failures that happen there won't happen here.
Part of my response will be related to personal views or personal observations, and also having colleagues who work at Moa Point. The systems that they have down there in terms of the scale and complexity are quite different to ours. The expense that has to go into looking after a plant like that is significant. And dare I say that it's probably just another example of the long-term underinvestment that's been sort of applied to various degrees around the country. I think everybody knows that Wellington is one of those places. They've had a number of woes over a couple of years now, and I think it's a very strong sign of their aging infrastructure failing, and now that coming to the fore. So that's the biggest thing there for, and also for places like this, we have very disparate systems, but also here we tend to only build for what we need. We don't necessarily require the types of complexity that's being applied, say the likes of Hamiltons, the Aucklands, the Wellingtons, Christchurches and things like that. So our systems are far simpler to operate, even though they are far more labour intensive. They are much simpler to operate, and therefore we can remove a number of what should we call them, critical control points that would potentially lead to catastrophic failure.
No, that gives me some assurance. Yes. Yeah.
Our plants for what they are, out here in what we call rural areas, and I've worked at TCDC before, where we obviously very similar demographics, and the good thing about rural communities is that we buy what we can afford and we buy what we need, not what we necessarily want. And that's a really good thing. We're far more frugal and far more effective in terms of where we put our money and our effort. That's the broad good thing about rural New Zealand, is that they are very, very good at that, is what I've found ever since I've immigrated here a number of years ago.
Well, to be fair, we sort of have to install what we get told to as well. If you looked at the Matamata wastewater plant, with those nitrogen requirements, that's the classic law of diminishing returns, isn't it?
Yes.
Plant 11 million, and all of a sudden now it's 67 million. I'm saying because we have to reduce those nutrient loads exponentially, basically, for probably a minimal benefit on the environment.
Yeah, well, we're always going to have those minimum requirements. However, since, of course, since we decided to go on the course that we did with Matamata, is that they are re-looking at the national standards now, and going forward, that will probably be a good sort of guide as to some commonality around the country in terms of reduction of complexity, but still meeting our environmental outcomes. So yes, that one is a bit of an outlier for us, but the great thing is about we're still retaining elements of what would I call it, parts of the systems that will give us much greater resilience, because we're actually looking at hybrid-based systems out here. We'll still be having detention of certain of the ponds and things like that. Whereas you're going to find a place like Moa Point and others, they generally, what comes in must be treated and must go out. And if it doesn't, it then passes straight through as fully non-compliant. So space is a big deal, obviously, and out in areas like ours, we've got the ability to actually retain some space for, providing us additional resilience and what have you. So that is a good thing for us as well. But yes, we are going to have to be following stricter standards going forward. But there is the new regulations that are coming out there that do recognise that affordability is starting to become a really big issue, or we're just going to be sitting in another 50 years' time finding ourselves in another infrastructure deficit. So I think there is recognition for that, and that's a positive for our industry.
If I could just ask for a point of clarification from Councillor Dewhurst. I was listening to your question. Thank you for it. I was reading there. Is the underlying question that you have associated with that is, do we have a risk of potential catastrophic failure that would result in environmental, extreme environmental pollution? Is that the underlying question?
Yeah, and I know you've mentioned the failure of some of the ponds and what have you, as being what, Taraha and Morrinsville in particular. You've mentioned that to us, right?
That to me is, in terms of environmental damage, those two, I'm just checking, those two are the ones that are uppermost in my mind, that if we had structural failure there, we'd be into that situation.
Those two in particular, our resilience there is lessened purely due not to the nature of what we have constructed there, or the nature of how we treat effluent. It's more about longer term. Medium to long term, we really need to be looking at desludging those plants and recreating that resilience. Those plants are very reliant on the number of days that you can actually process wastewater through it, and generally you're wanting to get around about sort of anywhere between 10 and 25 days is where we're going to be getting natural treatment versus the likes of a Moa Point or Ketty and Hamilton and stuff like that. Of course, our new plant in Matamata is going to be slightly different. That is going to be able to treat wastewater far quicker. So it'll be able to take in greater volumes. This is where we're going to be able to create your additional capability for growth and what have you, specifically around that particular plant. But are we still at reasonable to significant risk in terms of the two plants that I mentioned? Yes, we are. But that's related to operational interventions that we need to undertake, and those are very clearly spelled out in the Water Services Delivery Plan that's gone across to Waikato Waters. And once we can get that desludging out there and replenish the capacity that we had, let's say, some 15 to 20 years ago, that will definitely increase our resilience of those plants.
Not an operational cost.
Thanks.
Pretty much. Pretty much.
So I want to come back to the actual risk. So disruption to essential service delivery. Are we what is the top one or top two or top three in terms of essential services?
Water and wastewater, absolutely. And those risks I talk about are actually not going to stop treatment. It's just going to be environmental disaster. We'll still be able to treat.
Exactly. So I want to shape that first, and then I want to start delving into. We talk about So thank you for all the work that's gone into the paper. We talk about that there's a difference between what our risk rating is and our risk appetite is. And one of the reasons for that is aging infrastructure. So my question is, in terms of that particular risk, what is the strongest mitigation that we have for aging infrastructure? Which is what I'm not necessarily seeing in the paper. I know we talk about it and around it, but what would be the main thing?
The strongest mitigations that we can find there is increased capability in asset management, knowing our assets far more intimately than what we know them today, knowing their condition, and basing their condition and capability on performance, which is something that's really starting to gain some traction in the asset management world at the moment. So those are probably the biggest thing. I come from a predominantly maintenance background, and I'm a huge fan of driving maintenance off good sound information and performance-based information. So if we were to start looking at sort of silver or golden bullets here, those an increase in organizations' asset management maturity in terms of how they practice asset management, what information they hold. Don't collect 10,000 pieces of information if you only need 100. Rather concentrate on the 100. Okay. Good condition assessments and condition assessment programs are ultra important, and those are what should be coming through activity and asset management plans. And here I see that we are actually really starting to get onto that sort of a logarithmic rise in terms of how we actually monitor our assets. So that's that. An increased investment in renewals is probably something that's over the years, generally water's infrastructure has always had to compete with a number of other differing priorities that all local authorities have. So no local authority is exempt from, unfortunately, having to try and balance the best bang for your buck versus the money that you're going to get in terms of renewals. And water's-based renewals has suffered over, say, the last 15 to 20 years. So going through to CCOs, I think the biggest things you're going to be getting out of the likes of Waikato Water's done well, or the CCO model, is their sole purpose is going to be concentrating on water's assets. The money that they get is going to go straight into the water's assets. They'll potentially be in an uncompetitive environment to be able to utilize the money for what it's intended for. Even though, of course, it's still affordability is always still going to be there.
Thanks very much for that, Darren, because where I was leading to with my questions is on page 87 of our pack. We say that one of the controls that we have in place is our performance and condition assessments of all of our assets. And we're saying that the level of effectiveness of that particular control is effective, but I would potentially, argue is not the right word, but challenge whether having it in place makes it effective, or having it in place and it's working well and it is funded to the extent that it closes that gap between rating and renewal is effective. So I just want us to be thinking about that when we're doing the presentation of our risks.
Yeah, Jen, you've hit the nail on the head. There is no point throwing money at something if you're not going to implement its findings and its outcomes. But since I have been here, I have noticed that this council specifically, everything that I've raised as a concern has been taken seriously, and we've seen some big strides just over the year and a bit that I've been here. And I was elected Waters Activity Manager at Hamilton City Council for 7 years prior to this, and I think the team, including with asset management and with our strategy people, we've actually made some really big strides just in a year, in my opinion.
Thanks, Steph. Councillor James has a question.
Yeah, just in terms of, good report, and I don't have anything, to raise about what's been put there, but and not trying to be flippant, but from 1st of October, as you pointed out there, Waikato Water's done well, takes those risks away from us. Question mark. I mean, there's still our plants, we still have our maintenance strategies in place, but then the risk goes to Waikato Waters.
Well,
It's an MPDC. I mean, I'm not trying to
Good
pump
question.
the ball, but
I believe the risk becomes shared
right,
because we're the owners of the entity
yes.
and we are accountable to our community.
Oh, yes, sure.
So-
No, I
so-
appreciate all that.
I
But
think the implementation of risk mitigation is more measures sit more with Waikato Waters there, but we still have a connection to it.
yeah,
So that does change the protocol.
yeah, that's what I'm saying, because that's the main focus on this report, really. It's in terms of the two waters, and then they disappear. But I mean, I know we've still got a duty of care, but say we don't. And but yeah, that is, yeah.
If I may, that's an extremely pertinent point. Now, obviously, our water services delivery plan, which was required from legislation to actually be in place and say how CCOs could potentially work and what have you, that's ultra important. That had to contain this council's all of their financial requirements that the CCO would be taking over, but also all of the operational things that they would need to be doing as well. Luckily, local authorities on an annual basis will get to interact with the CCO and set expectations. And that's going to be local authorities' remaining capability to influence. And we would obviously, as a future employee of Waikato Waters, I would fully expect each local authority to be ensuring that their interests are looked after through the oversight that's going to come, from the local authority. So that partnership, as long as that partnership is strong, all of the relevant what would we call them, checks and balances are in place. And obviously local authorities will be monitoring the CCO's performance as well. So yeah.
I'm not sure if it's the right avenue or but to get to the nitty gritty of what we're talking about here with the maintenance, right? We've identified that desludging is a high priority. Right? Now that's in the expectation that has been given to Waikato Waters as to there needs to be some action on it, right? Okay. And so that and we get back to this issue of where the priority is and where the money comes from. Well, it's coming out of our ratepayers that are paying water. So yeah, that's right. Okay. All right, so it is there. Thank you.
But it has been budgeted for too. So it has been budgeted for too, and some of it's coming out of reserves too. I think from memory. So yeah, so it's not a surprise anyway. Yeah.
So I think we've covered off water and wastewater. My next question relates to stormwater. And if we think about what happened in terms of Waipa and Otorohanga, there was a lot of impact on the stormwater system, which then got into the wastewater system. So I know that we've talked about more point, but was there anything that has come out of Waipa, Otorohanga in terms of lessons learned that we've taken on board that would be better in terms of our disruption of essential services? Sorry, I didn't read that very well.
Not at this point, but we will certainly be touching base with our colleagues. And one of the things we identified in our cover report is that as the waters transition, there will be a new focus on this essential service delivery, a disruption to essential services, which will be around the roading, the stormwater systems, the solid waste. So we will be coming back to you in a year's time with a natural rebalancing of our organisational risk in relation to the specific.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? I think it's a tough space. I mean, this is one of the areas that you need a lot of money to make sure that things go well, but money is tight. And so, yeah, I feel for elected members in terms of the decisions that have to be made for communities. And thank you nonetheless. the recommendation is that we receive the report. And that Ash is moving. We have a seconder. We have Councillor James seconding. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, or none carried. Thank you very much for your time today. Nice to
Thank
meet
you.
Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
So we'll move on to the next item of the agenda. If is that okay? 8.8, which is the Audit New Zealand report. I'm not sure whether we have Audit New Zealand attending or whether it's not. Excellent. Okay. Welcome, Olivia. Over to you in terms of a brief update, and then we'll open for comment and questions. Thanks.
Cool. Kia ora koutou. I don't have much to update. The only update was the audit management report that you were provided that was circulated separately, was originally given to you in draft form and sent off to Audit New Zealand for finalisation. They have since finalised it and there have been no changes, so just wanted to pass that on. But yeah, you can take a read and take any questions.
Well, I was hoping audit was going to be in the ring. Yeah. Just, I mean, I've got papers here. I've got to sign off the audit fee for the proposed coming year, but I did have, that's unfortunate because I did have questions for them. Some of the concerns I have around these fees is because they have been around the table for a long time in the past, and you know, we were looking at fees of around about 128,000 a year, this and that and the other, and it's not all that long ago. And also, you know, sometimes when they're actually, you know, they budgeted fees and it was like 250,000 last year, and then the actual was 290,000, nearly 300,000. These are probably plus GST at that side of the point. And then, but then they note that, you know, and I've seen these figures in the past as well, where they have, it's funny how they have the budgeted fees and then their actual, and they give a big explanation that they always go over an hour, so we get a really good deal because they've spent all these more hours. And yet they continue, and then they come back and they estimate that, well, this year at 262,000. The thing that, you know, we're working as council because, you know, JD, you just mentioned, you know, things are tough out there for people. We're in a time where we're trying to do the best we can, and as a council, we're bringing prices, you know, rates down as much as we can to reflect that, because there are people out there that are struggling. We see that in the rates over arrears, and it's starting to show, and I think we're going to see more of that, unfortunately. Hate being doom and gloomy, but every year, you know, I sit here and then, but audit, they don't seem to miss out, and their prices are going up and up and up. And Andrew, you know, you mentioned it before too, and then a lot of the councils now, we are starting to talk about the audit fees. And there has to be an area where it needs to, you know, they're talking 1,000 hours, estimating, well, that must be about $260 an hour. You know, they're charging every hour pretty good money. I'm not saying it's not worth that, and I do value audit. I mean, it's one of the biggest backstops for councils is when members of the public say, you know, there's councillors are wasting money, or they're embezzling money, or they're just, you know, I can actually go back and say, look, we had audit come through the place and they go through with a fine tooth comb. So it is reassuring having them there, but nonetheless, it is prudent for us as governments to challenge the figures and to actually challenge the costings on it. And it just seems, you know, you can't just keep putting it up and up and up, because that's how it is. You know, they're talking 3%, you know, in staff wages. I get that, we understand that, but I'm pretty sure if we go back in time, and I'm more than happy to do that, I think it's going up more than 3% per year. In fact, I'd be estimating like 20-25%, you know, so it has to be said, and I'm the one that'll say it. I'm not, you know, because we're representing our communities, because once again, there's one lot of people that pay for it, and that's the ratepayer. So I'm in a position where I really need to sign it, but I actually thought they were going to be, or even on Zoom, because I'll be having the same conversation if they were in the room, which I have in the past when I was back in the day, because it does have to be said. So yeah, hopefully they get to see this, because it does need to be said. And how we go about that, I believe you can actually go to the Auditor General, and there's places like probably PwC or Deloitte that can do audit. And once again, it'd be interesting to see the councils that do use those ones and get a comparison on what they're paying for audit fees for a council this size. Once again, it's not a criticism of them. We might be getting the best deal out, but once again, we don't know. That's all I'd say on that. Really value audit coming through. I believe our staff do a great job too in providing them the information. They sort of indicate that, sometimes it's a little bit of a delay in that, but I'm not quite sure if that's always the case. So that's all I'll say on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with Ash on that. And I'd just like to probably say one thing we don't sort of mention is the unspoken cost of staff time, everything, putting all this stuff together. And it's probably significant as well.
Yep.
And I'd be keen, like you mentioned with insurance, I'd be keen if we were able to test the market to sort of be putting it out to maybe a private or another provider. And be keen if we could maintain a relationship with that, so you have the same auditor or same auditing company coming through every year, so that it don't have to start from step one again and work. They've got an idea of what the processes are and everything. They don't have to start from scratch, because that's where a lot of the time gets taken up as well, and some misunderstandings. And it just seems Renee and her team it just sounded to me like very pedantic. And hence why I made the comment at the December meeting, but never mind. That's all I've got to say.
We've got, well, they've been consistent, because how long have we had them in recent times? Forever, basically. So, bringing in a PwC or something would sort of conflict that statement, because you got bringing in somebody brand new. I'm more concerned with the comments they made there, because there were still a number of misstatements and disclosure matters that required corrections, resulting to multiple versions of the draft annual report. And then again, it went into the next one on accounting records and what have you. So whether this is them trying to justify the extra cost, or whether we were deficient, significantly deficient. Right? Do you know where I'm?
Right. Well, if I can comment, just to the point about the auditor and the appointment of that, we get an opportunity to comment on that through the Office of the Auditor General, and I'll just check on when that next occurs, because that's our time whether we can say whether we want to express an interest in a different approach or a different type of auditor. To the point that Councillor Dewhurst raises, which is really a point I was thinking about myself in terms of this audit leader and the upcoming audit. What we control is what we do, and clearly there were some deficiencies in what we did at the last audit. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had the annual report adopted late. So we can control that, and we need to make sure that doesn't occur again. We need to ensure that the quality of our documentation is to the standard that our auditors expect. To your comment about whether there was a material issue or not, we would have a view on that. Having said that, I'm not going to debate that. I think we will improve what we've done, learn from our lessons, and make sure we're not in the same situation.
Look, I know how much effort you put into it. All right, so that's not in question. It's just is when they make that statement there, is it material in the sense of how much that extra cost was, or is it just words that they put in there? It's questioning what you've done.
Well, I want to answer that by just saying they have an expectation and we have to meet it.
So I want to thank you for everyone for your comments. I see there being two parts to it. One is what we can control in terms of how we present the information. And if we can do that in an efficient way, it will reduce potentially the audit costs that we have. And then there's also the other side, which is not under our control, which is how can audits do things more efficiently. And my understanding is they are doing different things like more electronic type of sharing of information, etc. But I guess the key thing is we can only control ourselves. I take on board the points about testing the market. I do note that Renee did reach out to both, the three of us, so Manaya, Ash and myself, to actually have a catch up prior to this particular meeting, but I don't think we got a chance to have that hui. So my recommendation is that given the sentiment of today, we should have a catch up with them to share those comments directly.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the final part of it is in terms of we're being asked for feedback about the recommendations that Audit New Zealand had provided on the previous annual report. And my understanding is we have seen these before, so not new, and so we are grateful to receive them in the finalised format. But I would make a plea again to Manaya and the team of I'm still uncomfortable about the number of recommendations that we have in that place, in that space, and also the recommendations that hang around for a while and are not implemented, which can ultimately result in us receiving an opinion that is qualified in some way. So my plea is, what can we do as a committee to support you and your team so that we're not in that position again come the next audit?
Well, I think I don't need any further assistance from the committee. I think the audit team's approach to the management letter perhaps enables us to bring to a close issues where we disagree with it, because they're saying now that the management letters doesn't need to come to the Risk and Assurance Committee. My preference is that the committee sees that, because we have had more issues than I would prefer on the list, and I'd like to demonstrate that they've been addressed. And one way of addressing it is we completely disagree with what they say. We don't believe we have an issue, and so I've said to the team, let's be very explicit about that, because if they're not going to see it, they don't see it as an issue that needs to be pursued, then I'm not going to spend any time on it either. But I still think and agree that there are more outstanding issues on the list than I prefer. So my goal is to remove those, eliminate those.
And I guess too, if we're paying over a quarter of $1 million a year for an audit fee, it's the information we take out of it. It's almost a case where you'd like to see a few things, and we take that on board and we improve by it. Exactly. You know, we don't know what we're doing wrong until it's written in front of us and it's there. And so in a way, if I was spending over $250,000, I'd want a few things, you know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't like them to charge me $250,000 and say everything was tickety-boo, sweet. You know, like, it's in a way, it's almost like not value for money, if you know. I'm not suggesting that we go out of our way to get non-compliance or audit things, but the things that come out of it, and some of them might be minor and small, and it's also healthy where we can challenge and disagree, because I see it both ways. I see a negative remark as a positive remark that, right, yep, okay, guys, make sure we don't do that again. Or what have we got in place to mitigate that from happening? We don't want to read about the same thing next audit report or the next one, because that's also when they get pedantic as well if we're not following improvements that we can make. So I see the reports as good things. It's indicators as well, and it's also yearly, whether it's, you know, 2 yearly or whatever it might in the future. I don't know, but maybe yearly, because you don't want to go off the track. And yeah, so I see them as things we can learn by. Yeah.
Thanks, Ash. What I will say in defence slightly of Audit New Zealand is that the accounting standards shift all the time, and so the expectations on them shifts in terms of what they need to do. And although I agree it would be great to not be in an annual cycle, I think that's just the space that we're in, effectively like a regulator. So that's the hands, like I say to Manaia all the time, that's the hands that we're dealt, and that's the hand that we have to play until further change making in that space. But if I return us to the recommendation, it's the first one is that we receive the report to council. The second is that we note the change in reporting, but I'd like to note that Manaia has suggested we continue the same level of reporting that we had done previously. And I think I think that would be valuable for this committee and ultimately council to see those reports. And the third one, I'll take Steph's guidance on this. I'm not sure if it's a recommendation or a staff action of Manaia, Ash and myself catching up with Audit New Zealand after this committee meeting to have a discussion around audit fees and, so to speak, testing the market. Is it a recommendation or a staff action?
It could just be.
I've actually already said that.
Oh, well, so it's already action. So we'll take the two recommendations that we receive the information and that we note the reporting, but our preference is for the wider reporting that we're already receiving. I'm happy to move that recommendation. Ash is seconding. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Okay. Carried. Thanks, Olivia. I felt like we were having a discussion amongst ourselves, but nonetheless, we appreciate you. So let us now move to item 8.9 on the agenda, which is the Safety and Wellness Report. Welcome, Kate. Over to you for comments and then we'll...
Thank you. So first of all, I just wanted to introduce Monique. I haven't brought her up here because it's her second day. I didn't want to put her in the hot seat so early. But of course, Lucy's gone on maternity leave now, and Monique is replacing Mivan, and her role is Action Advisor role, so slightly different role from Mivan's. I'm very excited to have her on board. Really just a couple of things that I wanted to comment on from the quarterly report. You will have seen that we've updated our list of the top 10 critical risks. There's now 12 of them. And that's been a really good process doing that. We've involved lots of staff and had input from various people. And it's been interesting as well, interesting journey in terms of our understanding around what's the difference between a critical risk versus some of those things that we've actually put out separately as a contributing factor. We found that people were often wanting to say that fatigue, for example, was one of our critical risks, but of course fatigue doesn't kill you. It's the other thing that happens when you're tired and you don't manage as well as you normally would. So that was why we ended up separating those two. And of course, now the challenge is going to be working out how we slot all that into our systems and our reporting and so on. So there's quite a bit of work still to do there. And the only other thing just to comment on is it's great that we've got our Safety and Wellness Awards going last year, and I'm looking forward to see how that plays out this year, but it certainly was really well received.
Thank you, Kate, and welcome, Monique. And we'll look forward to you coming to the table next time. Any comments or questions from committee members in terms of the health and safety report? Or health, safety and wellness?
Just a couple of words. The Iodeogen and in the brackets Damstra. Are these 2 new words or what's going on with that?
Yes, you've picked up on a slight issue we have. We used to have a software called Vault, and then Vault was sold to Damstra, and now Damstra has been sold to IDGen. So it's actually the same system, but they just keep changing the name.
Learn something every day. It's always good.
It used to be saying Vault and then Damstra in brackets, just so people knew what I was talking about. Now, kind of moving along.
That's cool. I just it's something different. But no, I mean, good reporting again. It's good. It lays it all out. And no, I mean,
Cool. So, Kate, just the two critical risk audits, just the water treatment plant and pool liner, are they just solely highlighted because they're work underway, as in potentially hazardous substances and work situation that there's heavy machinery there. That's the reason they're being highlighted.
Yes, so normally we do about 8 to 10 audits per quarter, and those were just the ones that were done this quarter, and yes, they relate to areas where there's a significant amount of high risk work happening.
And any outcome from those audits?
Sorry, we haven't put that there. There were no major issues with either of those two. Yeah. Okay. Which is good to see. But we know that we need to be doing more, really, and we're fortunate that Monique comes from a high risk environment. She's done lots of auditing, so we're looking forward to getting her going on that.
I think I'll lean into that a little bit as well, because I was concerned that we'd across our critical risks, those like 2 for a month felt quite low, and then thank you for raising, so what came out of it, because to me, given the amount of things that we do with excavators, one audit across a 3-month period didn't feel like it was going to give us a really good sense of what was going on. So was it a resourcing issue?
Yes. Oh. Yes, it was. So Mibin had left. Lucy was covering both of her role and his role. So things were tight, and actually there are lots of ways that we learn about how our controls are working, and obviously one of them is also investigating near misses and incidents and so on. And I would say over that time period, Lucy put quite a lot of energy into making sure that we gathered information through those about our controls through those type of activities. So it was a slightly different focus. But moving forward, I would expect that those numbers will come up over the next couple of quarters.
Thanks for that. And so when we moved from the 10 critical risks to the 12 critical risks, was there anything that stood out in terms of lessons learned we needed to transfer into the new space? Anything?
I think the main thing that I had become really conscious of was that we had this very sort of big bucket of risk called psychosocial risks, and it included stress and fatigue and people behaving in an aggressive way, and it was just way too big a bucket. So I think that separating that is going to be able to help us to be more focused on the two different aspects of that. And it was interesting also the fact that we had already decided that we would separate out collapse of structures or excavations as a risk. And then, of course, with the events that have happened with landslides and so on, with the weather, that's really sort of brought that type of risk front of mind. And I think it's a good thing that we have actually created that as a separate risk to ensure that we keep our focus on that.
Thanks, Kate. And in terms of if there is an incident that relates to a critical risk, what is our process? Is there an investigation or an audit which results in actions? Sorry, I know elected members will be across this more than I, but I'm just trying to remember what our process is.
Yeah. So, yes, most, I'd say probably 99% of our incidents that are reported go to somebody to investigate. So it's unusual for us to say we're not even going to look at that thing. The depth of the investigation depends on how serious we think the outcome could have been. So sometimes the safety and wellness team will actually get directly involved in it, or we might leave the manager or team leader to investigate, but perhaps give them some prompts, or they might do it on their own. So it depends what you do.
Thanks, Kate. And just two more quick ones. The first one, in the report, it mentions that we had an electrician, that there was potential near miss. They were working in a live or close to a live environment. Is it normal to work in that type of live environment?
So,
Isolating?
I wish Lucy was here because she's more over this than I am, this particular one. But from what I can understand, there are circumstances where that type of work would be done. It just wasn't done in quite the way that they would have expected it to happen. And, that's why they have some additional controls in place, like, insulated pliers and,
strong isolations. Okay, thank you. Sounds like a one-off, but I just wanted to get a sense of that. And the final one is, because fatigue is so prevalent in the report, can I get a sense of, when we're saying a person works for more than 14 hours, my understanding of how things work is sometimes there's the standard working day, and then there's your on-call time, and you might be on call for an hour, but it gets logged as 7 hours or So I'm trying to understand that, because I've been in spaces whereby a person has technically worked 36 hours in a 24-hour day because of the way we do our recording. So I'm just trying to get a sense of, when we have a 14-hour, are they actually working all of those 14 hours? And so we have a bigger risk, or is it an administrative, so to speak, 14 hours? Apologies for the...
No, it's great.
That's an excellent question. We have had some fun actually trying to make sure that we're capturing things accurately, because at one stage, it's easy for the stand down time to get pulled through inadvertently into those hours. But that I'm pretty confident that we do have that correct now. So if you're a wastewater operator and you start work at 7 a.m. and you work until, say, 5, and then something happens with the weather and you end up continuing to work, and so quite a lot of that work may actually be done at home. So the level of risk can sometimes be lower. But yes, those are the hours that they work is the short answer. And we've put that 14 hours in place because by that point we think that's a long time to be working in a 24-hour time slot. And so we want to be sure that there is some thought going into that at that point, or before that point actually. And, they've reached out to their manager, they've said, I'm still working. Have we got somebody lined up to take over so I can get some stand down time? So it's not like we are making out that nobody ever works beyond 14 hours, because we know that, particularly with the weather events we've been happening, that's unfortunately not the case.
Yeah, just on that too, and I think too, it's not so much like because there's times when it's an emergency thing, or there's several call outs and they seem to be all at once. But I think the key is, for me, is how often that's occurring. You know what I mean? So, say for example, I don't think that we need to spend too much focus on events if it's happening on average once every 6 months or once a year, where a guy might work 14 or 16 hours in a straight sort of thing. But if it was happening on a weekly basis, then I think it needs to be addressed, like that. That's the thing, because, and especially talking about fatigue, like if they're doing that every day, then they're going to get fatigue. But if it's only once every 6 months or once every 9 months, once a year, then I don't know if we can put that down to fatigue. So it's identifying. But I think they also have a place where, if they do a long stretch, they don't need to come in until lunchtime or 1 o'clock the next day. There is things in place also that they're not expected back business as usual at 8 in the morning or whatever, if they work half the night. Is that correct?
Yes. So they get stood down, basically. Yeah. Manaya, did you want to add any comment to that?
I think what I would say is the focus on fatigue across the organisation and awareness of that has been a great push across the board. There's particular teams that where the incidence of events, or when I say events, an event could be an alarm at the middle of the night or the early hours of the morning, where they're occurring far too often, then is either desirable or potentially necessary. So what this issue has done is is driven us to look at what the solution is, and there are different views on that solution. But there's no question in my mind that there are too many instances where people are being disrupted from sleep in either in the early hours or late at night because of a system.
Are you suggesting like false alarms?
I'd say they're false. I guess the question. Well, sorry, false. Not right. It's a real alarm. The question is, does it need to be alarmed?
Yeah.
So I think there's that aspect of it, but there are also instances where I know we've had instances, not only in the recent storm event, but at other times, where staff members have been called out and had to work, additional hours. So there's a mixture. I guess what I'm trying to say is there's not a one fix for the whole thing, but I do think that it is something that we need to resolve, because it's got marginally better, I think, and I think part of that is because of the focus on the thing. For example, team try to reduce more alarms, but I don't think we've reduced enough. And to be honest, the previous chief executive had identified, my predecessor, that possibly the best solution for the kinds of things that are happening is a proper control room that's been monitored, which is kind of hard to justify for Matamata-Piako, but easier to justify across a wider collection of entities. So there is a way. There are ways to improve this, and I'm sure this will be one of the issues that is addressed. But it is quite a complex beast. So we've got a mixture of things in there. So I just thank the team, and what I will assure you is that our safety and wellness team are never backward in coming forward to the executive team to raise issues and challenge us, which is great. And in this particular issue, they've certainly helped us ensure that we're capturing better information on that. I don't know if I answered your question.
You guys can take it offline if that's okay. So Kate, the only other question that I would ask is for you to confirm that if a person works technically 14 hours, that is automatically logged as fatigue. It is not them saying I am fatigued.
So the process is that the administrative staff who enter the timesheets, they put it through.
I'm only saying that because in some spaces it might be challenged as that might be a near miss versus an incident. So just something for us to keep in mind. Thank you so much. The recommendation is that we receive the report. I'm happy to move. Councillor Andrew is seconding. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, all none carried. Thank you, Kate. Thank you. And item 8.10 on our agenda is our work programme, which we are taking as read, and we are being asked to receive it and also provide any feedback on the policies and the top risk deep dives. Do we have any feedback on the programme? Which is on page 120 of our agenda.
Suits me. I'm away from not away from 12th of April to the end of May, so it's all in between that. So.
Not quite what I thought you were going to say.
What I would say in terms of the June meeting is that we are receiving we are receiving 5 policies. So I just like for us to keep that in mind from the perspective of sometimes policies can take about 10 minutes each, so it can add some time to that particular agenda.
Yeah.
But if we are comfortable to do those.
As long as we know.
Yeah,
it's fine.
And Kelly, can you confirm that the team has gone through all of the policies, so to speak, that are relevant for this committee and determined which ones are due at which stages, and by reviewing them at these times, we will meet the deadline so that they are reviewed ahead of the timeframe. Thank you. And then I think also in terms of the top risks for June, we talk about the appetite. Yeah, I think we have already looked at those ones in the previous risk paper. So if there are no, everyone seems to be relatively happy. So well done, team. And Sandra, if it's you, well done for still managing to fit it on one page.
I can just pass that job along, but I'll pass it along.
Yeah, thank you. I think it was very helpful having it in that one page space. So our recommendation, I'm guessing, is that we receive, and the feedback is, yeah, we're all good. So I'm happy to move, but please have a seconder. Now we have me Ash seconding. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, Monday carried. We will need to move into public excluded. So Mayor Ash is moving. I'm happy to second. Councillor James will second. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, Monday carried. Thank you to everybody that came up.